The text message glared at me from my phone screen. Dad doesn't want to see me anymore. My heart sank as I read those words from my 14-year-old stepdaughter, a girl I hadn't even known existed 3 months ago. I'm Jasmine, and this is how I discovered my perfect marriage was built on lies. It started with Edwin's strange behavior last summer. My usually attentive husband began disappearing for hours, claiming work emergencies. His phone would buzz constantly, and he'd step out of rooms to take calls. When I asked questions, he'd brush them off with that charming smile that made me fall in love with him 5 years ago. Then came the night I heard him arguing in his home office. "Nina, you can't just spring this on me." His voice carried through the door. 14 years of silence, and now you want me involved? I pressed my ear against the wood, my stomach churning. "She's my daughter too," he hissed. "But you can't expect me to—" Fine, I'll meet her." The door flew open and I stumbled backward. Edwin's face went pale. "How much did you hear?" he asked, running his fingers through his hair, his tell when he's nervous. "Enough," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who's Nina? And who's this daughter?" He slumped onto our leather couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I should have told you years ago, before we got married." "Told me what, Edwin?" "I have a daughter, from a relationship before we met. Her name is Jordan." The room started spinning. "A daughter? How old?" 14. I did the math quickly. "You were 24 when she was born, and you never told me?" "Nina and it was complicated. She didn't want me involved at first. Then when she reached out years later, I was already with you, and I couldn't find the right time." "There's never a right time to tell your wife you've been hiding a child." I grabbed my keys. "I need air." "Where are you going?" "To Taylor's. Don't follow me." I drove to my best friend's house on autopilot, tears blurring my vision. Taylor opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. "He has a teenage daughter," I sobbed into her shoulder, "a whole other life I knew nothing about." "That bastard," Taylor muttered, pouring me a glass of wine. "What are you going to do?" "What can I do? There's an innocent girl involved now." I showed her the text message that had started it all. "He's already screwing it up." "Have you met her?" "No, but apparently Edwin promised to take her to dinner tonight and canceled last minute, again." My phone buzzed with another message from Jordan. "Mom says I shouldn't bother trying anymore." "You should meet her," Taylor said, reading over my shoulder. "Someone needs to show that girl not all adults will let her down." I stared at my phone, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What if she hates me? I'm the replacement wife who didn't even know she existed. Then she hates you, but at least you tried. Taking a deep breath, I typed, "Hi, Jordan. This is Jasmine, Edwin's wife. I just learned about you, and I'm so sorry about tonight. Would you like to meet for ice cream tomorrow? Just us?" The response came quickly. "Why do you care? You're not my mom." "No, I'm not, but I'd like to know you if you'll let me." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. "Okay, but I picked the place." I showed Taylor the exchange, my hands shaking. "What am I getting myself into?" "The right thing," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "Someone needs to step up for this kid, and it clearly won't be Edwin." When I returned home that night, Edwin was waiting up. "I can explain everything," he started. I held up my hand. "Save it, I'm meeting Jordan tomorrow." "What? No, let me handle this. Like you handled tonight? She's your daughter, Edwin, your flesh and blood, and you're treating her like an inconvenience." His face hardened. "You don't understand the situation." "No, I don't, because you lied to me for our entire relationship." I headed for the guest room, but I'm going to understand it, with or without your help. As I lay in bed that night, Jordan's text messages burned in my mind. I had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. My life would never be the same. Jordan chose a small cafe downtown, and I spotted her immediately. She had Edwin's eyes. She sat hunched over her phone, dark hair falling like a curtain around her face, radiating that particular brand of teenage defensiveness I remembered from my own youth. "Jordan?" I approached slowly, like you would a spooked animal. "I'm Jasmine." She looked up, eyes scanning me critically. "You're prettier than I thought you'd be." I laughed, caught off guard by her bluntness. "Thanks, I think. Is it okay if I sit?" She shrugged. which I took as teenage speak for yes. So, I said, settling into the chair across from her, tell me about yourself. What's there to tell? I'm the secret kid your husband didn't want you to know about. Her words were sharp, but I caught the tremor in her voice. Hey, I leaned forward, you're not secret anymore, and I'm here because I want to be. The waitress arrived, saving us from the awkward silence. Jordan ordered a chocolate milkshake and I got coffee. Mom says he used to visit sometimes, Jordan said suddenly, stirring her shake. When I was really little. Then he just stopped. My heart clenched. Would you like to tell me about your mom? She works a lot, 2 jobs. Jordan's voice turned defensive. She's doing her best. I'd like to meet her sometime, I said carefully. If that's okay with both of you. Jordan's head snapped up. Why? Because this situation affects all of us, and maybe we could handle it better together. She studied me for a long moment. Dad won't like that. Your dad doesn't get to dictate everything anymore. A ghost of a smile crossed her face, but then her phone buzzed. Her expression fell as she read the message. Let me guess, Edwin canceling again? She nodded, blinking rapidly. He promised to take me shopping this weekend, but apparently something came up at work. Give me your mom's number, I said, pulling out my phone. I'd like to talk to her. Jordan hesitated, then recited the number. I typed out a quick message. Hi, Nina, this is Jasmine, Edwin's wife. I'm with Jordan right now. Could we meet to talk? The response came quickly. My place, 7 p.m. tonight. I'll text you the address. Your mom agreed to meet, I told Jordan. Would you be okay with that? She shrugged again, but this time I caught a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Does he ever talk about me? The question gutted me. Honey, I didn't know about you until yesterday, but that's his failure, not yours. Mom says he's good at failing. She attempted a laugh, but it came out more like a sob. Without thinking, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. That evening, I pulled up to a modest apartment complex. Nina opened the door before I could knock, a petite woman with Jordan's dark hair and tired eyes. So you're the wife, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Coffee? Please. The apartment was small but spotless, covered in Jordan's artwork and school certificates. Nina handed me a mug and sat across from me at her kitchen table. Why are you really here, Jasmine? Because there's a 14-year-old girl who deserves better than what she's getting. Nina's shoulders sagged. I've tried everything. Begging, threatening legal action, guilt trips. Nothing makes him step up. Tell me everything, I said, from the beginning. So she did. About meeting Edwin in college, their brief relationship, finding out she was pregnant. How he'd promised to co-parent but gradually disappeared. How he'd send checks sometimes, but they became increasingly sporadic. The worst part? Nina's voice cracked. He keeps getting Jordan's hopes up, makes promises, then breaks them. I've told him to either commit or stay away, but he won't do either. That ends now, I said, my voice firm. I'm done watching him hurt her. Nina studied me carefully. Why do you care so much? You just found out about all this. Because someone has to, and because every time Jordan looks at me with those hurt eyes, I see myself at 14, wondering why I wasn't enough for someone to stick around. Nina nodded slowly. So what do you suggest? I think it's time Edwin faces consequences for his actions, real ones, and I have an idea, but I'll need your help. I'm listening. As I outlined my plan, I saw something spark in Nina's eyes, hope, maybe, or vindication. Either way, I knew I'd found an ally in this mess. Edwin had no idea what was coming. He did what? I gripped my coffee mug tighter as Nina showed me the old text messages on her phone. Told Jordan he was on a business trip in Seattle that weekend, Nina said, scrolling through the messages. Meanwhile, we were at the hospital because she broke her arm and I couldn't reach him. That was 2 months after our honeymoon in Maui, I said, feeling sick. He wasn't in Seattle. We were hosting a dinner party at our house. Nina's bitter laugh echoed through her kitchen. Classic Edwin, he's got excuses lined up like dominoes. My phone buzzed. Edwin asking where I was. I ignored it. Look at this one. Nina pulled up another message. Last Christmas, he promised Jordan a laptop for her schoolwork. Said he'd bring it by on New Year's Day. Let me guess. Never showed? Worse. Showed up 3 weeks later with some cheap tablet, acting like he was father of the year. Nina's hands shook slightly. Jordan pretended to be thrilled, but I heard her crying that night. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. I need to confront him. Be careful, Nina warned. When backed into a corner, Edwin gets creative with his lies. He'll try to turn this around on us. Let him try. I pulled out my own phone, scrolling through photos. See this? Our vacation to Mexico last spring? He told you he couldn't afford child support that month because business was slow. Nina's eyes narrowed at the image of Edwin on a yacht, champagne in hand. Son of a... A key turned in the lock and Jordan walked in, stopping short when she saw us together. Hey, honey, Nina said quickly. How was study group? Fine. Jordan's eyes darted between us. What's going on? I shared a look with Nina before speaking. We're trying to understand some things about your dad's behavior. You mean why he's a liar? Jordan dropped her backpack with a thud. I already know that part. Jordan, Nina started, but her daughter cut her off. No, Mom, I'm not stupid. I see his Instagram posts when he says he's too busy to see me. I know he went to Elia's wedding even though he told me he was sick that weekend. I felt my anger rising. He told you he was sick during Aaliyah's wedding? Yeah, but I saw the photos online. He looked pretty healthy doing the chicken dance. I pulled out my phone again, dialing Edwin's number. He answered on the first ring. Jasmine, where are you? I've been worried. Save it. I cut him off. I'm with Nina and Jordan. We need to talk. Now. You're what? His voice turned cold. Who gave you the right to lie to your daughter about being sick during your sister's wedding? Silence. Come to Nina's. Now. Or I swear to God, Edwin, I'm calling Alea next and telling her everything. Don't you dare. 20 minutes. I hung up. Jordan stared at me, wide-eyed. He's actually coming? He better. I turned to Nina. Is that okay, having him here? She nodded grimly. It's time. 19 minutes later, Edwin's car pulled up. He stormed into the apartment like he owned it. What kind of ambush is this? He demanded. Sit down, I said quietly. I will not. Sit down. Something in my voice made him comply. Now, I continued, explain to your daughter why you lied about being sick during Alea's wedding. I didn't. That's not. He looked at Jordan, who was fighting back tears. Princess, you have to understand. Don't call me that, she whispered. You lost that right. Show him the hospital messages, I told Nina. As Nina pulled up the texts, I watched Edwin's face. I saw the moment he realized he couldn't talk his way out of this one. I was trying to protect everyone, he attempted. Protect who? I asked. Your image? Your comfort? Certainly not your daughter. You don't understand the pressure. The pressure of what? Nina exploded. Being a decent human being, showing up for your child. God forbid you have to sacrifice a dinner party to be there when your daughter breaks her arm. Edwin stood up. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, I agreed. But if you walk out that door, I'm calling Aaliyah, then your parents, then every friend who thinks you're such a stand-up guy. Your choice. He sank back into the chair, deflated. Dad, Jordan's voice was barely audible. Why don't you want me? The question hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. Edwin opened his mouth, closed it, then stood up again. This time, he walked out. I moved to follow him, but Nina caught my arm. Let him go. We've seen everything we needed to see. Jordan's sob broke through the silence, and I wrapped my arms around her as she cried. I've got you, I whispered. We've got you. Over her head, I met Nina's eyes. The time for gentle confrontation was over. Edwin wanted to play games? Fine. Game on. He's been telling everyone you're having a mental breakdown, Taylor said, sliding into our usual booth at the diner. Aaliyah called me this morning, worried sick about you. I stirred my coffee, unsurprised. Of course he has. Can't have people knowing the truth. Speaking of truth, Taylor pulled out her phone. Look what I found on his sister's Facebook from 3 years ago. The photo showed Edwin at a father-daughter dance with his niece. The caption read, Best uncle ever, always there for his favorite girl. That was the weekend Jordan had her piano recital, I said. He told Nina he was out of town for work. Want me to show Alea? Not yet. I leaned forward. First, we need to gather everything. Every lie, every missed event, every broken promise. Build a case so strong he can't wiggle out of it. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Alea herself walked in. My heart jumped. I hadn't seen Edwin's sister since everything started. Jasmine? She spotted us and hurried over. Thank God. Edwin said you weren't taking his calls, that you were acting erratic. Sit down, Alea, I said quietly. There's something you need to know about your brother. Her face paled as I told her everything, showing her the evidence Nina had collected over the years. When I finished, she sat in stunned silence. I have a niece, she finally whispered. All this time? A niece your brother has been systematically disappointing for 14 years, Taylor added. That father-daughter dance, Alea said slowly. He insisted on taking my Emma because he said he never had a daughter of his own. He looked me in the eye and... She grabbed her purse and stood up. I need to see her. Alea, wait. No, you don't understand. Every Christmas, every birthday, she should have been there, with family, with me. Her voice cracked. Take me to her, please. I texted Nina, who agreed to meet us at her apartment. When we arrived, Jordan was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up, confused at the stranger in tears staring at her. Jordan, I said gently, this is your Aunt Alea. Oh my God, Alea breathed. You look just like our mom. Jordan stood awkwardly, unsure what to do. Alea stepped forward, then stopped herself. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm so sorry I didn't know, that I wasn't there. It's not your fault, Jordan mumbled. No, but I'm going to make it right. Alea turned to Nina. Every family gathering from now on, you both are invited. No more secrets, no more exclusion. Nina's eyes welled up. That would mean a lot to Jordan. My phone buzzed. Edwin calling again. This time I answered and put it on speaker. Jasmine, this has gone too far, he started. You need to come home so we can... She's with me, Edwin, Alea cut in, at Nina's apartment, with my niece. Silence. Your niece, she continued, voice shaking. The one you've been hiding from us for 14 years. The one you abandoned to take Emma to father-daughter dances. Alea, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a coward. She looked at Jordan, who was watching with wide eyes. But I'm not, and I'm done keeping your secrets. She hung up before he could respond. Within minutes, his text messages started flooding in. Don't do this. We can talk about this. You're destroying our family. Alea read them aloud, laughing bitterly. He destroyed it himself, lie by lie. What happens now? Jordan asked quietly. Now, I said, we show everyone exactly who your father is. No more hiding, no more excuses. He'll try to stop us, Nina warned. Let him try. Alea pulled out her phone. I'm calling Mom and Dad right now. They deserve to know they have another grandchild. As Alea stepped into the hallway to make the call, Taylor squeezed my hand. You okay? I nodded, watching Jordan show Nina her homework. For the first time in weeks, I actually am. Everything's finally clear. What do you mean? I mean I'm done being married to a man who could do this to his own child. I twisted my wedding ring off my finger. I'm done being complicit in his lies. Nina looked up, meeting my eyes. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between us. Edwin thought he was losing control of his narrative. He had no idea what was coming next. The truth was about to become very, very public. Edwin's parents arrived at Nina's apartment like a storm, his mother Barbara bursting through the door with tears streaming down her face. Where is she? Where's my granddaughter? Jordan stood frozen in the kitchen doorway as Barbara rushed toward her, enveloping her in a hug. Edwin's father, Robert, stood back, his face ashen. You look just like Edwin's grandmother, Barbara sobbed. All this time, all these years. Mom, give her some space, Alea said gently, pulling her mother back. This is overwhelming for everyone. Robert finally spoke, his voice rough. Nina, we had no idea. The things Edwin told us about you. What did he tell you? I asked, though I already knew the answer. That you didn't want us involved, Barbara said, wiping her eyes. That you threatened legal action if he told anyone about Jordan. Nina's laugh was hollow. Of course he did. Anything to make himself look like the victim. I have proof, I said, pulling out my phone. Every message, every broken promise, every lie. Would you like to see? They did. For the next hour, we showed them everything. The missed birthdays, the canceled plans, the elaborate excuses. With each revelation, Robert's face grew darker. The cruise we took last summer, Barbara whispered. He said he couldn't afford child support because business was slow, but he paid for our entire family to... That's not even the worst part, Alea cut in. Tell them about the father-daughter dance, Jasmine. By the time we finished, Robert was pacing the small living room. Where is he? Where's my son? Probably at our house, I said. Hiding. Not anymore. Robert pulled out his phone. Edwin, family emergency. Nina's apartment, now. No excuses. 20 minutes later, Edwin walked in, stopping short at the sight of his entire family. What is this? He demanded. This, Robert's voice was deadly quiet, is the moment you face what you've done. Dad, whatever they told you. Sit down. Robert pointed to the empty chair. And for once in your life, tell the truth. Edwin sat, his eyes darting around the room. I can explain everything. Explain what? Barbara's voice shook. How you kept our granddaughter from us? How you chose vacations over child support? Or how about, Alea added, how you took Emma to that dance instead of attending Jordan's recital? I was trying to protect everyone, Edwin started. Protect us from what? Jordan's voice cut through the room. She stood straighter, braver than I'd ever seen her. From loving me? Princess, I told you not to call me that. She stepped forward. You know what hurts the most? Not the broken promises or the lies. It's that you had love to give. You just chose not to give it to me. The room fell silent. Edwin's face crumpled. I wasn't ready, he whispered. I wasn't ready to be a father. But you were ready to be an uncle? Alea scoffed. Ready to play dad to my daughter while ignoring your own? That was different. How? Nina demanded. How was it different? Because she wasn't supposed to happen, Edwin shouted, then immediately went pale as he realized what he'd said. Jordan's intake of breath was audible. Barbara covered her mouth in horror. Get out, I said quietly. Jasmine, get out. I stood up. Get out of this apartment, get out of my life, and get out of Jordan's life unless you're ready to be the father she deserves. You can't, she can, Robert cut in. And so can we. You're not welcome at family gatherings until you make this right, really right. Edwin looked around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. Finally, he stood up. This isn't over, he said. You're right, I replied. Divorce papers will be ready Monday. He slammed the door on his way out. As soon as he was gone, Jordan collapsed into Nina's arms, sobbing. I'm so sorry, baby, Nina whispered, stroking her hair. Barbara moved to embrace them both. We're here now. We're not going anywhere. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Robert. Thank you, he said gruffly, for bringing this family together, even as it falls apart. It's not falling apart, Alea said. It's rebuilding, the right way this time. Looking around the room, at Nina comforting Jordan, at Barbara making plans for family dinners, at Robert wiping away tears, I realized Alea was right. Sometimes things have to break completely before they can be fixed properly. And Edwin? He'd just broken everything beyond his ability to manipulate it back together. The truth was out. All of it. And there was no going back. The divorce papers sat on Edwin's desk like a bomb waiting to detonate. He stared at them, then at me, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally, desperation. You're really doing this? He asked. Sign them. We can work this out, he pleaded. Couples therapy, family counseling, whatever you want. It's not about what I want anymore. I pushed the papers closer. It's about what Jordan needs. Jordan? He laughed bitterly. The girls turned my whole family against me. My own parents won't take my calls. You did that yourself. His office door opened, and Alea walked in without knocking. Is he still making excuses? What are you doing here? Edwin stood up. This is between me and my wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife, I corrected. And Alea's here as a witness, along with some other people. On cue, Nina walked in with Jordan. Behind them came Robert and Barbara, then Taylor. Edwin's face went pale. What is this? An intervention? Actually, yes. Alea perched on his desk. See, big brother, we've been talking about all the lies, all the manipulation, and we think it's time you heard what that's done to everyone in this room. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, you do, Robert's voice boomed. Sit down, son. Edwin sat. Barbara went first, pulling out a photo album. Every Christmas, every birthday, every family vacation, there's a hole in these photos where Jordan should have been. You stole those memories from us. Mom, I'm not finished. She turned to Jordan. I missed 14 years of your life. I can never get those back. Alea stepped forward. Remember Emma's dance recital last spring, when you played Proud Uncle? That same day, Jordan was competing in a debate tournament. She won first place, but you weren't there to see it. How was I supposed to be in 2 places? You weren't, Nina cut in. You knew about Jordan's tournament months in advance. You chose the recital because it was easier, because Emma didn't come with complications and guilt. Edwin's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape. My turn, Taylor said. Remember telling me Jordan's mom was unstable? That she was keeping you from your daughter? I believed you. I comforted you. Meanwhile, Nina was working 2 jobs to support the child you abandoned. I sent money. Sometimes, Nina corrected, when it was convenient, when it didn't interfere with your vacations or your image. Finally, Jordan stepped forward. My heart ached at how adult she looked in that moment. You know what I tell people when they ask about my dad? She said quietly. I tell them I don't have one, because that hurts less than explaining that my father chooses not to be in my life. Jordan, please. I used to make up stories, she continued. Tell my friends you were a secret agent or working overseas. Anything was better than the truth, that you just didn't want me. Edwin's shoulders slumped. That's not true. Then prove it, I said, sliding the divorce papers closer. Sign these and then prove it. Be a real father. No more lies, no more excuses. What are you saying? I'm saying sign the papers, then make a choice. Either be fully present in Jordan's life, reliable, honest, committed, or stay away completely. She deserves better than your half-hearted attempts. Edwin picked up the pen, his hand shaking. If you sign, Alea added, we'll help you rebuild these relationships. But if you keep lying, keep manipulating, you'll lose us all. He looked around the room one last time, perhaps hoping someone would save him from this moment. No one did. The scratch of pen on paper was deafening. Now what? He asked, voice small. Now, Robert said, you start proving to your daughter that she matters, that she's not a mistake or an obligation, but a gift you've been taking for granted. And if you fail again, Barbara added, if you hurt her one more time, you'll answer to all of us. Edwin nodded slowly, finally looking defeated. Jordan, he said softly, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but you're right, she cut him off. It's not enough, but it's a start. As everyone filed out of the office, I lingered behind. Edwin looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw real remorse in his eyes. I really messed up, didn't I? Yes, I said simply, but you can choose to do better. For her sake, I hope you do. I walked out, leaving him alone with his choices and their consequences. In the hallway, Jordan waited with Nina. You okay? I asked her. She nodded, then surprised me with a hug. Thank you, she whispered, for making him face it. Sometimes I realized the biggest act of love is forcing someone to face their failures, and sometimes the greatest revenge is simply telling the truth. 3 months after the intervention, I sat in the bleachers watching Jordan's volleyball game. Nina was on one side of me, Barbara on the other. Alea sat behind us with Emma, who had become inseparable from her newfound cousin. He's late, Nina muttered, checking her phone. Again. Edwin had promised to be here, had sworn this time would be different. The game started. Jordan kept glancing at the gym entrance between serves. Did he at least text? Barbara asked. Nothing, I replied. Halfway through the first set, the gym door opened. Edwin walked in, trying to be subtle and failing miserably. Jordan missed her serve, her eyes locked on her father. 20 minutes late, Alea hissed. Better than last time, I guess. Edwin made his way to our section, but before he could sit down, Nina stood up. Outside, she said. Now. They walked out, leaving the rest of us to watch Jordan try to focus on her game. Through the gym windows, we could see Nina gesturing angrily. Should someone... Barbara started. No, I cut in. Nina needs this. 5 minutes later, they returned. Edwin's face was red, and Nina looked satisfied. What did you say to him? I whispered as she sat back down. That if he can't show up on time, don't show up at all. Jordan needs consistency, not half-hearted efforts. The game continued. Jordan's team won the first set, largely thanks to her serves. During the break, she jogged over to us. You came, she said to Edwin, her voice carefully neutral. I promised I would. He cleared his throat. You're playing really well. I'm team captain now. Since when? Since last month, Barbara cut in. When she led them to regionals. We were all there. Remember the video I sent you? Edwin shifted uncomfortably. Right. Sorry, I've been busy with work. Don't, Jordan interrupted. Just don't make excuses. Either be here or don't. She jogged back to her team, leaving Edwin looking like he'd been slapped. She's right, you know, Alea said quietly. The excuses only make it worse. The second set started. This time, Edwin watched intently, even cheering when Jordan scored. But during a timeout, his phone rang. He stepped away to answer it. Here we go, Nina muttered. Edwin returned, already gathering his coat. There's an emergency at work. No. I stood up, blocking his path. You're not doing this to her again. Jasmine, I have to... Look at her. I pointed to Jordan, who was watching us with that all-too-familiar look of disappointment. Really look at her. Is your emergency worth breaking her heart again? He hesitated, then sat back down. I'll handle it later. Good choice, Barbara said firmly. Jordan's team won the match. As people started filing out of the gym, she approached us again, still in her uniform. We're going for pizza to celebrate, she said. Would you like to come, Dad? The invitation hung in the air. Everyone held their breath. Edwin glanced at his phone, then put it away. I'd love to. At the pizza place, I watched Edwin actually try for the first time. He asked Jordan about school, about volleyball, about her friends. She answered cautiously at first, then with growing animation. Remember that science project I told you about? She asked him. The one with the solar system. I don't think you mentioned it. Oh, her face fell slightly. Right, that was last month. I got an A. Tell him about the presentation, Emma piped up. The one where you made the planets light up. As Jordan explained her project, Edwin's phone buzzed repeatedly. He ignored it. I'd like to see it, he said when she finished. The project, if you still have it. Really? Her whole face lit up. It's at Mom's. I could show you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday, Nina reminded her. You have debate club. After that, Jordan said quickly, maybe Dad could come watch the debate first? Everyone turned to Edwin. This was the moment, another promise to either keep or break. He nodded slowly. What time? 9 a.m., Jordan said. You have to be on time. It's important. I'll be there at 8:30, he said. Front row. As we left the restaurant, I overheard Jordan talking to Nina. Do you think he'll really come? I don't know, honey, but he's trying. Yeah, Jordan said softly. I guess he is. I watched them drive away, thinking about karma and second chances. Edwin had a long way to go to earn back trust, but tonight was a start. Tomorrow would tell if he meant it. The morning of the debate competition, I arrived at the school auditorium at 8:15. Nina and Jordan were already there, setting up note cards at their assigned podium. Has he called? I asked Nina. She shook her head. Nothing. 8:25. Jordan kept glancing at the entrance. 8:30. Barbara and Robert arrived, followed by Aaliyah and Emma. 8:40. The debate coach started gathering the participants. He's not coming, is he? Jordan's voice cracked. Before anyone could respond, the auditorium doors burst open. Edwin rushed in, slightly out of breath but wearing a suit and tie. I'm here, he called out. I made it. You're late, Jordan said, but she was smiling. Traffic was terrible, but I left early just in case. He held up a small gift bag. And I brought something. Jordan opened the bag and pulled out a silver necklace with a star pendant. Your grandmother, my mom, wore this during her first debate competition, Edwin explained. She gave it to Aaliyah, who gave it to Emma. Now it's yours. Barbara gasped softly. Aaliyah squeezed Emma's hand. Really? Jordan touched the pendant carefully. Really? Edwin took the necklace and fastened it around her neck. Break a leg up there, kiddo. The debate began. Jordan was brilliant, her arguments clear and passionate. Every time she scored a point, Edwin cheered louder than anyone. During a break, Nina leaned over to me. He's different today. Let's hope it lasts. The final round came down to Jordan's team versus the defending champions. When Jordan delivered her closing argument, Edwin was on the edge of his seat. The judges have reached a decision, the moderator announced. Jordan's team won. The auditorium erupted in cheers. Edwin jumped up shouting, "That's my daughter!" As medals were being awarded, Edwin's phone rang. He glanced at it, then declined the call. Work? I asked. They'll survive without me. He smiled. This is more important. Afterward, we gathered in the lobby. Jordan clutched her medal, still wearing the star necklace. Dad, she said suddenly, remember my science project? The one with the planets? Of course. You were going to show it to me today. Well, she glanced at Nina, who nodded encouragingly. I was thinking maybe instead we could get lunch, all of us. I'd love that, Edwin said. But first, he turned to face everyone. I owe you all an apology, a real one. The lobby fell silent. I've been selfish, manipulative, and cowardly, he continued. I hurt everyone in this room, especially you, Jordan. I can't change the past 14 years, but I can promise to do better starting now. Actions speak louder than words, Nina reminded him. I know. He pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. That's why I've already blocked out every Thursday evening for Jordan's volleyball games, and every other Saturday for whatever she wants to do. No work calls, no emergencies, no excuses. Jordan's eyes widened. Really? Really. He showed her the calendar. And I've set up a proper college fund, one that can't be touched for anything else. Nina, I'll email you the details. What about work? Barbara asked. Your clients? We'll have to understand that my daughter comes first. He looked at Jordan. If they don't, I'll find new clients. I watched Jordan's face carefully, seeing hope battle with caution. You mean it? Test me, Edwin said. I'll prove it. She hugged him then, quick but real. When she pulled back, both had tears in their eyes. Lunch? She asked. Lead the way. As everyone headed to their cars, I hung back with Nina. Think he'll stick to it? She asked. I don't know, I admitted, but today was different. He chose her first, without hesitation. Thanks to you, she said, for forcing him to face everything. We all did it together. Walking to my car, I thought about karma and consequences, about how sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Edwin had lost his marriage and his comfortable lies, but he might have gained something more valuable, a real relationship with his daughter. And Jordan? She got what she always deserved, a father who finally showed up. As for me, I got the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes doing the right thing is the sweetest revenge of all. The star necklace caught the sunlight as Jordan walked ahead, laughing at something Emma said. It sparkled like a new beginning. Sometimes that's all anyone needs, a chance to start over, to do better, to be better. And sometimes that's enough.
Well, I'll just say this. It's ridiculous that someone as plain as you is getting married before me. You'd look better in that ragged dress, and even the groom and relatives will tell you so. In front of me, I heard the mad voice of my sister next to the ruined wedding dress. My vision darkened with despair. However, as her older sister, I couldn't leave her to be such an irresponsible adult. I will show her how happy I am and make sure she regrets her behavior. My name is Sophia. At 27, after dating Jacob for 3 years, I recently submitted our marriage registration and our wedding is coming up soon. Preparing wedding invitations, food, and selecting flower decorations has been challenging, but thinking of it as an opportunity to show gratitude to the people who have supported us and our friends who have watched over us gives me motivation. Moreover, I have been particular about the wedding dress I chose. Wearing a wedding dress is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I've always dreamed of a pure white dress since I was little. I spent quite a bit on the dress, but I wonder if I'll be okay wearing it. I think that wedding dress suits you best, Sophia. Besides, wearing a wedding dress is your dream, right? You've been saving up for it for a long time, haven't you? Thank you, Jacob. Yes, it's a special day, so I'll wear the dress I chose with confidence. That's what I thought. The wedding dress I chose has a lovely design, made with plenty of tulle and lace, created by a renowned designer. Just imagining myself in this dress, standing at the ideal venue with my beloved husband, makes me look forward to the wedding day, and it truly feels like a blissful moment. However, there were some problems in my daily life. Sophia, did you really manage to marry Jacob? Wouldn't Jacob be having regrets? Marlene said. Marlene, you shouldn't say things like that even as a joke, I retorted. When I visited home, my sister Marlene, 2 years younger than me, lounged on the sofa and smirked as she spoke. Even if it's a joke, it's an unforgivable thing to say, but I know better than anyone that Marlene is serious. Jacob is so handsome. He's too good-looking for an ordinary woman like you, right? She continued. You shouldn't judge people by their looks alone. Marriage isn't something you decide based on appearances. I replied. Well, coming from you, that might actually be convincing. I never thought you'd get married before me. Marlene said. Stop it, I yelled. Marlene is always confident, constantly studying makeup and hairstyles to appeal to men, and she's the type who frequently checks herself in the mirror. Ever since we were children, my sister often belittled me in public by saying, unlike me, my big sister isn't pretty. It seems she always strives to be on top. Well, apart from appearances, I've never felt inferior to my sister. Our relationship as sisters is far from good, and her recent behavior has been particularly strange. Hey, Sophia, remember when Jacob recently came to our house to greet everyone? I was there too, right? Did Jacob say anything about me? She asked. What do you mean? I replied. Like, wow, you have such a cute sister, or your sister is more refined and beautiful than you, she said. I'm leaving, I said in frustration, and tried to leave our parents' house. As I was about to leave, Marlene muttered something to herself. Acting all high and mighty just because you managed to get married, even though you're still so plain. Just you watch. She said. Excuse me? Did you say something? I asked. Just go home already. She snapped back. This attitude of hers wasn't new, and I went home that day without giving it much thought. Strangely enough, on the day Jacob and I were having our pre-wedding photo shoot, Marlene came to the site with our parents to observe. Foon, oh, this is the wedding dress you're going to wear on the big day, she commented. Marlene, the shoot is about to start. Could you move aside, I asked. On the day of the shoot, I was scheduled for a solo photo session first, and while preparations were underway in the cathedral where the ceremony was to be held, Marlene moved around without regard for others. All right, I'll move. What's the big deal? Just because you're wearing a wedding dress, you're acting like you're the star. More like I actually am the star today since it's my pre-wedding shoot. It'll cause trouble for everyone if we don't proceed quickly. Hanf, you're a typical example of someone who tries to be liked by being considerate, because you're just average looking. Just so you know, that dress doesn't suit you at all. Marlene whispered to me, making sure our parents, Jacob and his visiting mother, couldn't hear. What I exclaimed. Just as I was about to argue, Marlene walked away with a smile. The photo session for me began, but Marlene's words stuck with me, making it hard to smile naturally. As the pre-wedding shoot progressed, my smile became increasingly strained. Are you nervous? Sophia asked Jacob's mother, my future mother-in-law. We had only met a few times, but she was gentle and very kind. I'm just having a bit of trouble smiling. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's okay, your beautiful appearance in that dress is something to be admired for as long as possible. Take your time with the photos. I felt briefly reassured by my future mother-in-law's kind words, but soon Marlene disrupted the atmosphere again. Are you planning to trouble your in-laws? I feel sorry for having such an incompetent sister. Who would want someone like you as a daughter-in-law? Marlene said. Marlene, please stop, I responded. At that moment, my future mother-in-law stepped between us and said with a smile, "It's so thoughtful of you to accompany your sister for her pre-wedding shoot. But this is for Sophia and my son. Please step back a little." She gently took Marlene by the hand and led her to the corner of the venue. As the shoot continued, Marlene watched me with a stern expression, repeatedly clicking her tongue in displeasure, worsening the atmosphere. "Maybe your sister's feeling lonely, like I stole you away from her." Jacob joked. "I'm really sorry." I apologized. Marlene's presence made the fatigue feel much heavier. But finally the preparations were complete. There's no such thing as over-preparing for one of the biggest events of your life. I did a final check to make sure everything was ready. As my wedding day approached, Jacob and I traveled together from our new home to the venue, where we proceeded to separate dressing rooms upon arrival. Soon, the moment I had dreamed of would arrive, when I would wear my ideal wedding dress and vow eternal love with the person I cherished. A childhood dream was about to become reality. Filled with a slight nervousness and overwhelming joy, I was about to open the door to the bridal dressing room when, unexpectedly, it swung open from the inside. "Marlene, why are you coming out of there?" To my surprise, it was my sister who emerged from the room. As she closed her bag with a spiteful smirk, she said, "Oops, I mistook it for the toilet. Is the bride's dressing room really this shabby? It's sad you have to get ready in a place like this, but it might be just right for you." With those words, Marlene hurriedly left the scene. Although she was a family member, it was still too early for her to be here. Puzzled by Marlene's strange behavior, I entered the bridal dressing room and was shocked by what I saw. The room, elegantly decorated to provide a calm atmosphere, now held a horrifying sight. There hung my wedding dress, mercilessly slashed and ruined. "What is this?" I exclaimed. The dress, clearly identifiable by its tulle and lace details, was supposed to be mine. As I stood dumbfounded before the ruined dress, the makeup and costume staff entered the room. Seeing me frozen in front of the tattered dress, the staff could not hide their disturbance. When I asked if anyone had been in the room, they told me that my sister had claimed she was setting up a surprise decoration for me and had asked everyone to step out. Could Marlene have cut the dress? Why would she do such a thing? I wondered. While I wanted to deny it, the circumstantial evidence pointed to Marlene being the culprit. My suspicion intensified especially because of her behavior ever since my engagement was announced and the way she had looked at me with hatred during the pre-wedding shoot. With trembling hands, I took out my smartphone and called Marlene. "What? Do you need something?" Marlene answered the phone immediately. Trying to hold back tears, I asked her clearly, "Marlene, can you tell me what you were doing in my dressing room earlier?" "Huh? Didn't I say I mistook it for the toilet? Have you forgotten already? Are you really that silly?" she replied. "That's definitely a lie. You ruined my wedding dress, didn't you?" I confronted her. As I pressed her with heightened emotions, Marlene laughed and said, "What? Something wrong with the dress? It's awful that you suspect me. Maybe this is divine punishment for your bad personality. It's sick that you seem to enjoy this. It's proof that you did it. Why did you mess up my dress so badly?" I expressed my anger openly. "Ugh, what a hassle. Do you have any proof that I did it?" Marlene said nonchalantly and continued. "Well, just to say, it's weird that someone as plain as you is getting married before me. You'd look better in that ragged dress, and even the groom and relatives will tell you so," Marlene said, and then she hung up the phone. The dress in front of me was beyond repair. The staff, who had temporarily left the dressing room at my sister's request supposedly for my sake, were constantly apologizing. But no matter how much they apologized, the dress would not return to its original state. I kept telling the staff, "It's okay," but I was really unsure if I could continue with the ceremony. In the midst of this desperate and heavy atmosphere, there was a gentle knock on the door of the bridal dressing room. "Sophia, how is your preparation going?" What is this?" my mother-in-law exclaimed as she entered. She had come to bring some refreshments for the staff. However, as she stepped into the dressing room, which felt more like a funeral than a wedding then, she looked very serious. "Why is the dress so damaged?" "The truth is, my sister." As I began to explain with disappointment, my mother-in-law nodded quietly and said, "I see. But it was good that we prepared a backup, not knowing what might happen." "What do you mean by a backup?" "Sophia, I have a suggestion," said my mother-in-law. Normally calm, my mother-in-law then showed a serious expression and offered me a strategy. "If you support me, I'll give it my all." Thanks to that strategy, I found the resolve to perfect a wedding that I once thought I would have to cancel. "Just you watch, Marlene. I will show you how happily I shine, and I will surprise you." Seeing my regained spirits, the staff became even more enthusiastic about decorating. With a new determination different from the emotions I had in the morning, I was ready to face the wedding. From the magnificent chapel set outside the venue, solemn music flowed. As the large doors in front of me opened, there stood my father, with the aisle leading to the altar before us. At the end of the aisle, at the altar, Jacob, my groom, was waiting. As I started walking down the aisle with my father, gasps of surprise rose from the guests. My father was shedding tears as he walked beside me. Meanwhile, Jacob, who was unaware of the situation, seemed surprised. With my veil still on, I sneakily glanced at Jacob's surprised face and also quickly checked the family seats on the bride's side. There I saw Marlene, who had expected me to appear in a tattered or hastily prepared dress, her expression surpassing astonishment. Marlene was so shocked to see me entering the chapel that she stood with her mouth agape, unable to move. I walked past my sister towards Jacob. As I left my father and took Jacob's hand, Marlene started to fidget with the handkerchief she was holding. We exchanged rings, shared our vow kiss, and exited to a shower of flowers. As we walked past Marlene during our exit, the handkerchief she had been pulling at finally tore. This ceremony was not about troubling my sister, but about sharing our joy. I momentarily forgot about my sister and fully savored the joy of the moment. After the group photos outside the chapel were finished, we were directed to head to the reception venue. It's good that it ended smoothly. I was really surprised. "You've chosen such a beautiful dress." Before returning to our respective dressing rooms, my husband and I exchanged a few words. Amidst the pleasant atmosphere as guests began heading to the reception venue, Marlene suddenly shouted loudly, "Wait, why are you wearing such a nice dress?" Marlene was pointing at the dress I was wearing. "What's with that long veil and even wearing a tiara? Your chest is also quite shiny. Why are you standing out so confidently when you're supposed to be less noticeable than me? You don't have the right to be so presumptuous." Marlene began shouting as if admiring the dress, but at the same time berating me. She clearly looked frustrated, but the dress I wore was indeed attractive. The dress featured a long veil woven from high-quality lace and a glamorous tiara decorated with Swarovski crystals. The silk shone beautifully, and the rich volume of the hem resembled a royal wedding. The chest was modestly yet delicately adorned with Swarovski crystals, too. It doesn't matter whether I'm beautiful or not. Every bride has the right to wear a dress she loves and have a wonderful day. You always look down on me, Marlene, but really, who do you think you are? I retorted. Everybody knows that beautiful people are above the ugly. Ugly people have a lower social status. Look, clearly, I'm the one who takes care of herself and looks beautiful, Marlene said as she turned to the guests and smirked maliciously. The guests, including our parents, were all shocked, and none could say anything. Taking their silence as agreement, Marlene gained more momentum. See, I'm definitely more beautiful. Yet I don't have a boyfriend, and my ugly sister gets married first. I can't accept this, she continued. Marlene glared at me fiercely and suddenly lunged at me. Oh, it's pitiful that such an ugly person would wear this. Take it off right now and apologize to the dress. Marlene, wait. This is an important wedding dress borrowed from Jacob's mom. It's what she wore at her wedding, so don't touch it. I screamed. As I tried to stop Marlene, venue staff and Jacob quickly intervened and restrained her. Marlene initially resisted, but quieted down when she heard what I said. Wait, that means it's a second-hand dress? So you were wearing rags after all. Treating something second-hand so preciously, you really are poor. Plus, being given rags by your mother-in-law, you're already being bullied, aren't you? No dreams or hopes at all. Serves you right, she said. I will not allow you to call this dress a rag. In the midst of the guests' merriment, Jacob's mother intervened quietly. She stepped forward with a smile and explained, "That dress is a haute couture piece, specially made. It cost $200,000 when it was first made." $200,000, Marlene exclaimed in shock. The price of silk and Swarovski has gone up since then, so it might be even more valuable now. We've had specialists handle its storage, so it's in perfect condition. She continued. Hearing this, Marlene's complexion turned pale. It seemed that specifying the actual price had a significant impact on someone like her. Why would you give such an expensive item to my sister? Marlene stammered. Because Sophia is very kind and will make a wonderful bride, Jacob's mother explained gently. It makes me very happy to think that my precious wedding dress is being worn by my dear daughter-in-law. That's not the point. Why was such an amazing dress prepared in the first place? Marlene pressed on. Marlene had likely assumed there was no backup dress and carried out her plan to ruin the original one. Jacob's mother then smiled slyly at Marlene and said, Marlene, do you remember how harshly you glared at Sophia during the pre-wedding shoot? Even after I pulled you away from her, I noticed you kept looking at that dress on your phone. I suspected you were planning something. I thought you were just a clueless old woman, Marlene muttered. Yes, our family and my husband are wealthy, so we're sensitive to malice from others. Jacob's mother replied smoothly. That comment particularly struck Marlene. What? You are wealthy? So Jacob is rich too? He's rich and handsome, so why did he choose my sister? Marlene screamed in increasing confusion and frustration. Why did I marry Sophia? Actually, I was planning to talk about it in my speech at the reception. Jacob answered shyly to Marlene, who had turned red with inquiry. When I first went out to eat with Sophia, she suggested we split the bill. It was the first time someone had ever suggested that to me, and I was surprised. Plus, she proposed splitting the cost for our new apartment's rent and even the wedding expenses. What? Going Dutch? I don't understand. If Jacob is rich, he should pay for everything. Is he lacking in generosity? Sophia, you should let a man lead and spoil you. That's why you're a flawed woman. Marlene criticized. That's exactly it. Every woman I've dated said the same thing and only saw me as a wallet. But Sophia is truly independent, the first woman I've met like that. I realized I didn't want to be with anyone else but Sophia, Jacob said firmly, adding that there were other reasons too, and he spoke of his love for me. Marlene clicked her tongue and said, Ugh, I can't listen to this. Boring. I'm not interested in a reception where such a plain sister is the star. Maybe I should just go home. After venting her frustration, Marlene suddenly lost her motivation and relaxed her shoulders. This was her usual pattern. She either creates a scene until she gets her way or until she gets bored. I have always endured her as her sister, but it is a real problem that her personality has not improved even as she grew up. Looks like I have to give her one last lesson as her sister, I thought, while grabbing Marlene's arm to hold her back as she yawned. This is a good opportunity to tell you. You will have to pay for the dress you ruined. Marlene grimaced in displeasure and then laughed triumphantly. Me? Ruined the dress? There's no proof of that. Why don't you save your sleep talking for bedtime? With that, Marlene shrugged off my hand and chuckled. It seems she was happy she managed to ruin the dress I had chosen. However, I must teach her what happens to people who trample on the happiness of others. As Marlene looked pleased, I smiled calmly and nodded. Unfortunately for you, everything was recorded on the surveillance cameras. I had them installed in the bridal dressing room. I'm even considering filing a criminal complaint for property damage. I hate to have a criminal in the family at a wedding. What? There's such an option at weddings. Marlene's laughter disappeared, and her face twisted again with surprise and panic. Before her, I continued to explain calmly. It's not an option. I had it installed just for my wedding day and will have it removed tomorrow. How can you just install and remove things on your own? That's ridiculous. This venue is the wedding venue that I run. What? You are the owner? I thought you were just a plain office worker. Whether I'm plain or not, it's true that I was an office worker until recently. However, my passion for wedding dresses and weddings grew stronger each day, and I decided to establish my own ideal wedding venue. It wasn't only due to my savings, but Jacob's mother, who is also an investor, supported me, allowing me to pursue my dream and manage a wedding venue designed for brides. This place is the venue you manage? Absolutely not. I've never heard such a thing from Mom or Dad. I had asked them to keep my entrepreneurship a secret from you. I thought you would say it's presumptuous of me to run a company, given my ugly appearance. Marlene's face, filled with anger and confusion, gradually softened as she listened to my story. I could tell exactly what arguments were taking place in her mind. So, you're saying I have lots of wealthy relatives? Then you can introduce me to a wealthy man, right? Yay, Marlene rejoiced. In the end, she hadn't thought of anything good. Marlene, do you think we can continue our relationship as sisters? You tore up a dress I was attached to. I never want to see your face again. Why are you saying that? It was just a little prank. I said I'm sorry, didn't I? Marlene's apology was superficial, not heartfelt, and she still acted nonchalantly. That recklessness brought my anger to its limit. What do you mean? Just a little prank? I will never forgive you. It's good I'm wearing this beautiful dress from Jacob's mom right now, but the dress you ruined was also precious. I will definitely seek compensation. What? You're really planning to seek compensation? How much does a wedding dress even cost? I don't have any real savings. If you don't pay, I'll report it to the police. Did you think that bullying your ugly, plain sister from childhood means you can do anything and be forgiven? That's no joke. Grow up already. Faced with my fierce response, Marlene collapsed, powerless. Seeing our parents crying, shedding different tears from those at the ceremony, I realized how selfish Marlene was and how much she had saddened them. Sophia is truly splendid. She's the exact kind of entrepreneur I had chosen. I was fortunate to have her wear the dress and to have invested in her company. Mom, that's my line. Please don't say it before I do. Watching Jacob and his mother converse leisurely, I smiled, relieved. After sending a disheartened Marlene back home, the newly started reception proceeded warmly. Despite significant troubles, it was the best wedding for me as I was able to build trust with the family I was joining. After the wedding, Marlene was expelled by our enraged parents. They apologized to me for being too lenient with my sister and strongly condemned Marlene's actions. Though Marlene left home, she couldn't change her job to pay for the dress she ruined, so she rented a small apartment near our parents' house. However, staying local meant she inevitably ran into old friends. Since my sister and I are close in age, the incidents at my wedding quickly became the talk of the town. Every time Marlene tried to engage with her friends, she was noticeably avoided, which disgusted her enough to make her flee out of state. The commute to work took up a significant amount of time, and her scant savings were depleted by the move. Marlene now uses her monthly salary and bonuses to compensate for the dress, leading to a financially strained life. She can no longer afford to spend on makeup or fashion. Once a confident trendsetter at her workplace, she now silently gets through her days in disheveled clothes, occasionally casting envious glances at her colleagues. Her only pleasure is on social media, where her posts, full of despair, increasingly alienate people. Meanwhile, Jacob and I continue to enjoy a happy marriage. Jacob is engrossed in his original job, and I have started creating unique wedding dresses at the venue, as suggested by my mother-in-law. Encouraged by investors who believe that if you love wedding dresses, you can definitely create ones that brides will adore, I am working with my staff on this unfamiliar task. Though it's challenging, there's an irreplaceable joy in crafting the ideal dress using beautiful tulle, lace, and silk. Remembering the dress Marlene ruined still pains me, but looking at the photos of me and my mother-in-law's wonderful dress, where Jacob and I vowed our eternal love, helps me heal little by little. Most of all, being present at the moment a bride I've dressed celebrates the best day of her life has allowed me to find new joy in weddings. I am grateful every day to Jacob for marrying me and to my mother-in-law who supported me at work and when my dress was destroyed. And, oddly enough, I am a bit thankful to my sister for reaffirming my love for wedding dresses. My name is Megan. I am 27 years old and work as an office employee. I live with my family of 4, including my parents and younger sister, in an annex on the land owned by my grandma, my father's mother. It seems that my parents have a kind of illness where they cannot love their eldest daughter, especially my mother, who always treats my sister, Sarah, as someone special. Sarah is always provided with meals as if it's a given, and she has all her necessities, but family conversations always involve only my parents and Sarah, treating me as if I am invisible. Even if Sarah takes my toys or we get into an argument, I am always the one blamed. Even if I stay silent to avoid being scolded, I get scolded anyway. In short, whenever Sarah tells our parents something, I am the one who gets scolded. When I was young and got scolded after fighting with Sarah, I asked my parents, "Why am I always the one getting scolded? I shouldn't be at fault here." My mother replied, "You look like that noisy grandmother, so I get irritated when I see you. You've been attached to your grandmother since you were little. I can't find you charming." In contrast, Sarah is adorable in both her looks and personality, the complete opposite of you. Looking like grandma was not my fault, and the reason I was so attached to her was because my mother often left me with grandma so she could fool around. I was too scared to argue back. When I couldn't bear my parents' pressure, I usually escaped to grandma's house on the property to refresh my emotions. Grandma sensed my state and welcomed me warmly. "Megan, when you want to cry, don't hesitate to cry," she encouraged me and promised, "Tell grandma anything. And I won't tell anyone else," so I prefaced with, "This is a secret from my parents," and confided about what happens at home. Grandma suggested that I come and live with her, but the thought of being completely forgotten by my family terrified me, so I refused her offer. From the time I entered elementary school, the difference in how my parents treated me compared to Sarah became more apparent. My position increasingly started to resemble Cinderella's, waking up early every morning to take out the trash, doing the laundry and putting it out to dry before going to school became my routine. When I moved on to middle school, cleaning and preparing dinner were also added to my chores, and my own time was reduced to just about 2 hours a day. Because I wanted to concentrate on my studies, I often went to grandma's house. When I returned home, the family meal was already over, and cleaning up after dinner awaited me. Then, I would fold the laundry, warm my body with the leftover bathwater, and go to bed. This was my daily routine. Despite my parents' opposition, I strongly expressed my desire to continue to high school, which was my first act of defiance. Sarah was receiving an expensive private education from middle to high school, and I understand that her education cost a lot. But my parents' opposition to my education seemed not for financial reasons, but because they believed, you don't need education. You have nothing in terms of looks or talent, so you have to make a living with your physical strength. Physical strength is your only strength, so you don't need education. We don't need anything else because we have Sarah for looks and brains, so you just work and earn money. However, I loved learning. While Sarah played with toys and games, I was not given any and instead spent my time in Grandma's well-stocked library, where reading became a great joy. That library later became my room, where I could study in peace, and my grades were always good. Despite having high schools and universities I wanted to attend, my parents forced me to work right after graduating from middle school. I had a dream I couldn't give up, so I took out the report cards I had hidden at Grandma's house and showed them to my parents. Then I pleaded. I don't mind going to a public high school, but I want to go to school. I also want to go to university and get a qualification that leads to a future. I'm sure I'll earn more after graduating from university than if I start working now. My parents were surprised by my good grades, showing interest in my report cards since elementary school. Sarah, who was there, saw my report cards and tore them up. Then, she said, "There's no way someone like you could be so excellent. You must have falsified the report cards to make it look like high scores. It's sneaky to use such tricks to deceive mother and father into letting you go to high school." I argued, "I didn't falsify the report cards. These are the real scores." But Sarah countered, "Then why did you have to hide them at Grandma's house and act sneakily? If you were upfront, you should have shown them to father and mother every year." "Dad, Mom, don't be deceived by her. She just doesn't want to work and wants to go to high school." My parents instantly showed an angry expression and said, "What a terrible child. Trying to deceive your own parents. You're not even close to Sarah in looks or grades. And you try to draw our sympathy with such methods. I'm worried about your future. Planning to become a fraudster or a criminal? I'm really disappointed. As soon as you graduate from middle school, find a job, and as a punishment, you'll also take care of breakfast preparation." I reached my limit, picked up the torn report cards from the trash, and hurried to Grandma's house. When I arrived at Grandma's house, she seemed to sense something and was waiting at the entrance. I confided to Grandma at the entrance, "Grandma, I might not be able to hold back my tears," and tears began to overflow. Grandma gently hugged me, sat me on the living room sofa, and quietly patted my back until I stopped crying. It's best to cry when you want to cry. Tears flush out stress hormones, so don't hold back and cry until your heart clears. I cried my heart out. It was a mix of frustration, sadness, and despair. After I stopped crying, as Grandma said, my heart felt clearer, and I somehow felt better. "Grandma, I'll give up on school and work to save money and then go to school. There's no other way now." After saying that, tears spilled again. Then Grandma said, "I also held back because my parents were around, but I've decided not to give up anymore. So Megan, don't give up either." Surprised by her words, I stared at Grandma. Grandma said, "Come on," took my hand, and walked with me back to the house where my parents and Sarah were waiting. When we arrived at the house, my father came out to greet us. Grandma directly confronted my father at the entrance. "Have you never considered Megan's feelings, making her suffer so much? Why can't you cherish Megan?" My father hurriedly took us outside and explained, "Mom, I don't hate Megan. But it's scary because my wife gets upset and becomes uncontrollable and abusive. I thought it was fine because Megan has always done as my wife said." "Why do you say that? Are you tormenting Megan together because your wife is terrifying? Didn't you feel anything even though Megan was suffering?" My father fell silent, hanging his head without looking up, so Grandma started walking back to the entrance again. At that moment, my father began to panic and said, "Mom, I understand. That's enough. Please stop telling my wife. we'll let Megan go to high school and university. Can you really convince Diane? If it's a lie, I'll kick out everyone but Megan from this house. Grandma said this, and my father, intimidated, responded, yes, I understand. I'll manage somehow. As Grandma left, she told me, if there's any problem, come here right away. My father was afraid of Grandma, not because she was frightening, but because he struggled with women who asserted themselves strongly. No matter what my mother or Sarah did to me, he ingratiated himself with my mother and behaved in a way to avoid being criticized himself. It's pathetic that such a powerless man was my father. After Grandma left, my father stayed outside for a while, lost in thought, before finally saying to me, let's go inside, and we entered the house, heading to the living room where my mother and Sarah were. Mom said at the entrance that we should let Megan go to school, my father reported. I declared that I wouldn't let a liar go to school, but then Grandma said she would pay for the tuition, so let her go to school. What he had been thinking about in front of the house was such a fabricated story. I could barely suppress my laughter. My mother reacted, saying, there's no need to send a child who lies to school. I said the same, but if we don't let her, we have to leave this land. After all, this land and house originally belonged to Grandma's grandfather, and she inherited it, he replied. So that's why we should leave? That's blackmail, isn't it? Because we're living in this great house for free, we have to do as told. What a cunning old woman. While they grudgingly agreed to let me go to school, my parents spoke these words. My father was good at coming up with such self-preserving lies and making others believe them. He was a pathetic father, but thanks to this lie, I was able to go to school, so I guess it's fine. The only one not amused by this situation was not just my mother, but Sarah too. It seems Sarah was anxious about the fact that I, whom she usually looked down on, might surpass her academically and possibly go to a higher-ranked school. Which high school will you go to? Megan, she asked. I'm planning to go to the local public high school. Really? Isn't that school for really smart people? Sarah was surprised. I don't think you can do it. Sarah laughed lightly. I have no choice but to choose the nearby school, because I can't do the housework if I go to another school. If you don't mind that, I could consider other places. Sarah did not stop me from going to high school. She didn't disrupt my entrance exam preparations, because if I went to a school far away, I'd need to move out, and she wanted to push the housework onto me. Though she didn't interfere with my studying, the petty harassments never ceased. She placed her things in my room and told my mother that I had stolen them, and told my friends that I was disliked by my family, continuing such childish acts. Fortunately, my friends understood that Sarah was acting out of a sense of superiority towards me, so it didn't become a major issue. However, my mother was different. Stop harassing your sister just because you can't win against Sarah's looks or grades. Or, you're unattractive not just in looks but also in personality. My mother showered me with the words Sarah wanted to hear. Even though I wanted to argue back, I stayed silent to avoid pointless conflicts and focused on my limited study time. As a result, I was able to pass the entrance exams of the high school with high standards that I aimed for. Upon receiving the news of my acceptance, I went to Grandma's house full of gratitude. Grandma, I can go to high school. It's all thanks to you. I really can only feel gratitude. If you hadn't provided me with a room, I definitely wouldn't have passed. And thanks to you talking to Dad, I got this opportunity. I've never been happier in my life. It's the best day. As I conveyed my heartfelt words to Grandma in excitement, she also rejoiced. No, this is the result of your efforts, Megan. You really did well. Congratulations. I will never forget this day. However, there was a minor commotion regarding this acceptance. When people in the neighborhood learned that I had been accepted into a high school with high academic standards, my mother and Sarah became displeased with the words praising me. Megan is really wonderful. It's amazing she got into such a difficult high school. She always greets properly, she's smart. And you must be proud of your daughter, aren't you? Furthermore, the lie that my father would pay my tuition leaked out, causing a big commotion at home. Megan, Are you so displeased that Sarah is well regarded by our neighbors? You deliberately chose that high school to outdo Sarah. She must be cheating somehow. There's no way Megan is smarter than Sarah. I even get sarcastic comments about attending a low-level school, they accused. People say they envy me for having such a wonderful sister. Where is there anything to be proud of? Megan, you should quit going to that high school. This is so embarrassing. If I don't pay the tuition, you can't go. So I won't pay, my father declared, and my mother and Sarah were even more furious knowing his lie. My mother said that because Grandma had said she would pay the tuition, they agreed to let me go to school, but this lie caused such humiliation. Considering the public eye and since the tuition itself was free, my father ended up paying the other necessary expenses. I chose to continue studying at Grandma's house while reluctantly handling the household chores. There were days I wanted to give up on the housework, but I persevered through stubbornness. I feel that not only my face but also my personality resembled Grandma. Although she came from a wealthy family, she never spoiled me financially. I also attended university using scholarships. I carefully chose the university to fulfill my dream of working as a researcher for a cosmetic manufacturer, and I was able to realize that dream. I got a job at a major cosmetic manufacturer and thought about living independently as a working adult, but decided to commute from my parents' home. There were days when I couldn't keep up with the housework, but I also paid fines besides the money I was supposed to bring home. Sarah also attempted to get a job in the cosmetic industry like me, but ultimately didn't succeed and found work in another industry, I heard. It's not clear which company she settled on. But Sarah and my mother boasted that she got a job at a better company than mine. I've gotten used to the actions showing their sense of superiority towards me for a long time, and if necessary, I could even pretend to be upset. A year after starting my job, I finally got my first boyfriend. He was my supervisor at work and my mentor. After 2 years of dating, we promised to marry. When I first introduced him to Grandma, I trusted her insight. From her conversation with him, Grandma felt, Tom is sincere and has a heart that cherishes Megan, and she approved, I think he's a perfect man for you. It's okay to marry him. However, I felt anxious about introducing him to my parents and Sarah. The reason was that his appearance was too good to be matched with mine. He was fashionable, clean, tall, and an attractive young man. Introducing such a man to my family, I anticipated that my mother and Sarah would make a big fuss. I also worried that they might suggest I give him up to Sarah. When I discussed my concerns with him, he said, "It's true I'm tall, but that doesn't necessarily make me handsome. And it's you, Megan, I want to marry, not your sister. Even if they oppose our marriage for impure reasons, I won't back down, okay?" I responded, "It's not that. I hesitate because I'm worried that you will have a bad experience with my family, who are rude and childish. I'm used to it though." However, he assured me, "It's okay. You are special," and decided to meet with my parents to seek their consent for our marriage. Grandma encouraged me, saying, "Even if they oppose it, just go ahead and get married. There's no need to endure anymore. The endurance is over. It's time for you to think about your own happiness." Grandma and my boyfriend suggested we should go to my parents' house right away. He said we should act before hesitating due to worrying about how my mother and Sarah might react or behave. Agreeing to his proposal, we headed to the house where my parents and Sarah were waiting. Surprisingly, my parents and Sarah received us very warmly and readily agreed to the marriage. As I was astonished, my mother said, "Sarah will marry a better man. She's marrying the president of her company. Sarah is pregnant. It's an added joy. What a turnaround for Sarah. We need to inform the neighborhood." Sarah scoffed. "Did you want to show off by bringing a handsome guy? Too bad, Megan. You'll never beat me now. You're doomed to walk the bottom rung." Despite the discomfort Tom experienced as expected, our marriage was approved. Our wedding preparations were proceeding smoothly without any interference from my parents or Sarah. When I heard about the date for Sarah's wedding as the wife of the company president, she said, "I'll go to your ceremony first, and then have a bigger one." I was a little worried if she could have her wedding with her belly getting bigger, but we settled on the venue and date. One day, I received a call from my mother at work. "I used the $40,000 from the safe for Sarah's wedding expenses," she said. "That money from Grandma was supposed to be for your wedding, wasn't it?" We found the money and couldn't help but say lucky, she continued. I responded, "What? That's not mine, nor is it for the wedding. I know what the money is for, but you shouldn't use it. It should be put back in the safe," but my mother joyfully replied, "Trying to deceive us with such lies is useless. We already spent it, too bad." Reluctantly, I revealed why the $40,000 was in the safe. Actually, Dad was embezzling at his company. They said they wouldn't make it a big deal if it was returned soon, and that money was borrowed from Grandma. Dad had no savings and begged Grandma in tears for a loan. "Really? Is that true?" asked Dad directly. "I don't know more than that." After ending the call and sighing as I put away my phone, it rang again. I thought it was my mother, but this time it was from Grandma. "I need to talk to you. Come to the house," she said. I was supposed to have dinner with Tom, but we changed plans and headed to Grandma's house together. Upon arrival, the usually gentle Grandma was angry. At first, I thought she was angry because my mother and Sarah had stolen the money from the safe, but the real reason was different. Sarah's company was actually introduced by Grandma at Father's request, and that company had a close relationship with Grandma's family since her father's time. The current president of the company was married but had been caught having an affair with Sarah, and the chairman, the president's father, contacted Grandma. Moreover, the president's wife's parents were old acquaintances of Grandma, and they also brought information. Seeing Grandma angry and panicking, a rare occurrence, I knew she called me because she was aware of the situation. After calming Grandma, Tom and I asked my parents and Sarah to come to Grandma's house. Grandma had them sit in the living room and confronted them with a stern face unlike her usual self. They noticed something was wrong with Grandma and sat down as told. "Sarah, is it true that you are having an affair with the president of the company I introduced you to?" Grandma asked. Sarah answered lightly. "Well, he said he's getting a divorce. He's still married, though." Grandma trembled with her hands, and I continued the conversation. The chairman of the company, where Sarah worked, and the wife of the president, who Sarah had an affair with, were old friends of Grandma, and I conveyed how Sarah had tarnished Grandma's reputation with her relationship with the president. Hearing this, my mother retorted, "Mother-in-law, that issue has been settled with a compensation payment. By marrying the president, Sarah will strengthen the company's ties. Isn't that a good thing for you? It's natural that the president chose not to pick his wife because Sarah is attractive. What's the problem?" At this, my father was shocked and asked, "Did you really have the money to pay such compensation?" My mother revealed, "I used the $40,000 from the safe to pay the president's wife," and upon hearing this, my father turned pale and lost his words, crying, "What an arbitrary thing to do." My mother, with a pale face, asked me, "Wait, is that embezzlement story you told true?" I affirmed with certainty, "It's true." Hearing this fact, my father shouted at my mother in anger, "I'll divorce you. This is the end of my life." This was a level of anger I had never seen in my father before, causing my mother and Sarah to tremble. Grandma regained her composure and quietly but firmly told my parents and Sarah, "I will never have anything to do with you again. Get out of that house. I'm giving it to Megan, so leave as soon as possible." At her words, my father desperately pleaded with Grandma, "Please help me. Lend me some money." But Grandma sternly refused. "I'm cutting ties with you here. I've already spoken to a lawyer to pass my estate to Megan. I never want to see your faces again. Don't come to my funeral," and coldly watched as my parents and Sarah left the house. Afterward, Grandma left everything to a lawyer. And somehow my parents and Sarah were made to leave the house they were familiar with on Grandma's property. Father was arrested due to the embezzlement, and after the divorce, my mother returned to her family home, where there was no place for her because her brother and his wife were already living there. Sarah, left alone after the president and his wife reconciled, lives in a small apartment and continues to work part-time at a grocery store even as her due date approaches. I plan to live in the family home inherited from Grandma after getting married. Like Cinderella, who finally grasped happiness in the end, I am savoring that fate. My name is Anna. I am 25 years old and work as an architect. While handling my duties at a local architectural firm, I spend my days off relaxing by reading books. My childhood was unimaginably tumultuous, a stark contrast to my current peaceful life. The person who brought me happiness was not my biological parents, but my aunt, who is always cheerful and overflowing with love, 12 years older than me. Today, I want to talk about precious memories with her. As a child, I was treated coldly by my strict parents, especially noticeable in the first grade. Making such a simple mistake. Don't you think it's embarrassing not to get a perfect score on a first grader's test? They scolded, and all I could say was, "I'm sorry." Why did such a child come from us? My mother would say disappointedly. Their sighs were painfully heart-wrenching. Failing to meet their harsh expectations, I was a mix of frustration and sadness. I was born into a doctor's family in a posh residential area of a provincial city, with a doctor father and a nurse mother. From my early childhood, I was sent to private schools, expecting to become a doctor. However, contrary to the expectations of my family and friends, my academic performance was mediocre, and reaching the top ranks was challenging. Right after starting school, I felt unwanted by my parents and was constantly irritated by them. Despite this, I studied alone for long hours at home and at cram schools after returning home, striving to gain my parents' approval. On the other hand, my sister, 1 year younger than me, Doris, was exceptionally gifted academically. Even as a kindergarten student, she was learning advanced material that surpassed mine. This meant that if we took the same tests, she would perform better. Naturally, my parents were captivated by the high-achieving Doris, spending most of their time and resources on her, which led to me being forced to quit cram school before the second grade. Being abandoned by my parents was a shock, and I immersed myself in solitary study in an attempt to improve. Despite these efforts, my parents only saw me as not only poor in studies but also a gloomy and reclusive person. However, the bond between us sisters was strong, and Doris always adored me. This was certainly reassuring, but my self-loathing from feeling inferior to my sister never disappeared. As I progressed to the second grade and my sister Doris entered school, the unfair treatment became even more severe. On holidays, to broaden her education, my parents often took only Doris to theaters and museums in the city center. I was told, giving pearls to pigs who don't appreciate their value is a waste, and I was forced to stay home alone until dinner. Doris, always wearing a guilty expression, seemed to want to say something to our parents but never spoke up. I spent my time alone at home, continuously crying to the cheerful voices of other families I could hear outside. Feeling unintelligent, I believed neither my father nor my mother cared about me. Having thought parental love was everything, I continually blamed myself. Then one day, my parents decided to take only Doris on an overnight trip to a distant museum, likely thinking they couldn't leave me alone for 2 days. On the morning of the trip, I was hurriedly woken up and taken to an old apartment in the next town. There my father, with a displeased look, rang the doorbell, and a disheveled blonde woman opened the door. It was Carole, my father's much younger sister, and my aunt. After a brief conversation, my father returned to the car without even a glance at me. Holding a large bag and left behind, a sleepy Carole said, "Come in," gesturing with her chin towards the room. I hadn't interacted much with Carole, having only spoken to her a few times as we weren't very close. My father had repeatedly warned me, Stay away from Carol, she's from the lower class and barely finished middle school. Indeed, Carol's first impression was a bit suspicious with her putting like blonde hair and gray sweatshirt. Yet, while apprehensive about being left in her care, I sat on the thin cushion in the living room. Feeling uneasy, I was suddenly greeted by the comforting smell of food. Along with it, Carol appeared, holding a tray with clam chowder and scones. "Didn't have breakfast, did you?" she asked, to which I cautiously replied while sipping the clam chowder, "No, thank you." The rich broth slowly spread through my mouth. Delicious. Right? Clam chowder is the best for breakfast, Carol laughed. Carol's warm smile and the clam chowder eased my tension. Over the next 2 days, Carol took great care of me. The stews and risotto she made were delicious, and I ate without any reservations. While she watched over me, she would smile and ask, "Want some more?" as she offered additional servings. Furthermore, Carol took me to the zoo and genuinely enjoyed showing me around, pointing out, "Look at that gorilla. Isn't it cool?" That day at the zoo was truly enjoyable. From then on, whenever my family went on trips, I was always left in her care. Carol always welcomed me warmly. Gradually, I came to trust her and was genuinely drawn to her warm personality. Carol often said, "I always wanted a little sister like you," and treated me with great care. However, while my parents continued to leave me with her, they spoke ill of her. I heard that Carol had troubles during middle school and did not go on to high school. According to my father, she ended up in a bottom-tier job and barely made a living. "If you don't want to end up like her, don't slack off in your studies," my father would say half-jokingly when he was drunk. I had always believed my father's words as absolute, but I found it hard to accept his assessment of Carol. She was skilled in cooking and a very good person. I could not understand why she was spoken of so negatively. The difference in how my parents treated my sister and me worsened day by day. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I was given only the bare minimum of clothes and food, barely avoiding a report to Child Protective Services. Although my parents were known as local dignitaries, outsiders would never imagine they were capable of such behavior. When I focused on studying, I was told, "You're a nuisance if you don't leave the room, so get out," and was chased outside. Whether I studied or not, the situation was harsh. I wasn't allowed to return home until dusk, and without any trustworthy friends or adults, I had to spend my time learning in parks or libraries. However, on weekends, Carol warmly welcomed me. Carol was the only one who cared about my health. One day, as I was eating the fluffy omelet she had made, Carol suddenly made a proposal. "Anna, would you like to live with me?" she asked. As I sat stunned, she gently stroked my head with her cold hand. "If you feel life at home is hard, think of me as a parent. We'll eat together every day, sleep side by side, and even go to the zoo sometimes," she said. Could such a dreamlike proposal be real? Just hearing it felt surreal. "But you might not want a dumb parent like me," she laughed self-deprecatingly. I blurted out, "That's not true." Her proposal was incredibly appealing. However, I questioned whether I could truly wish for such a thing. Carol was still unmarried, and I worried that living with me might burden her. Additionally, I considered whether my parents would see it as a betrayal. "Carol, is it really possible for me to live with you?" I asked quietly. Carol gave a thumbs up and replied with a smile. "It's okay. Okay." It was an irreplaceable moment. I strongly desired to become like family with Carol, and made up my mind. Later, Carol discussed this with my parents, but their opposition to me living at her house was surprisingly strong. It seemed to stem not from affection but rather from a concern for social appearances. They disliked the idea of having to explain to the community why one family member was missing. After much discussion, it was decided that I would simply stay as a lodger at Carol Clay's house, and no adoption took place. Once everything was settled, things moved quickly. With just my essentials and my school bag, I moved to Carol's house. On the last day at home, my parents coldly said, "Don't neglect your studies. If you become a nuisance and trouble us, we'll send you to an institution right away." Only my sisters seemed genuinely sad about my departure. But even my young sister could sense that I was being neglected by our family. As she tearfully said goodbye, she told me, "Big sister, I love you." Though I still harbored feelings for my family, my sister's tears pained me. When I appeared before Carol with mixed emotions, she greeted me with a beaming smile, exclaiming, "Yay, I'm so happy you've come to stay with me." At that moment, I vowed to become a family with Carol that neither of us would be ashamed of. Starting a new life with Carol was not without its challenges. Support from my parents was minimal, and I had to transfer from a private to a public school. Despite this, every day was filled with joy. When I struggled with homework, Carol would sit with me and look through the textbooks, trying her best to find the answers together. Even when I didn't score perfect on tests, she would celebrate my 90%, saying, "90 points is amazing. You're really something, Anna." With Carol's support, I gradually became more outgoing, made friends to play with after school, stopped going to cram schools, and spent less time studying. Strangely, my grades improved even without much effort, and I was able to maintain top marks in my class. The chronic stomach pains and fatigue that I had disappeared a significant change for me. I believe they were due to the stress caused by my parents' strictness during my childhood. By the time I reached 6th grade, I had grown emotionally, the influence of my parents began to fade, and I freed myself from the narrow worldview they had created. As my sister got older, she started sneaking out to visit me at Carol's house. She was still performing well academically, which made our parents proud, but she seemed to have other interests and often expressed her frustrations to me. When Carol cooked, my sister would watch with shining eyes and always help out by her side. 8 years flew by since I started living with Carol, and I enrolled in a national university's architecture department. There was a special reason I chose this faculty. Also, because I received a grant-based scholarship, I didn't need to ask for financial support from my parents, and I didn't burden Carol either. On the day I was accepted to my first choice university, Carol cried tears of joy and made my favorite dish, seafood dresta. Over celebratory drinks, she sprinkled her conversation with stories of her own origins, revealing that she was the result of her mother's affair. While her father initially raised Carol as his own child, concerned about public perception, he ultimately treated her without affection. Despite her early longing for parental love, Carol entered a rebellious phase and became almost estranged from her parents, who were, in fact, my paternal grandparents. "Anna, you've turned out so well. You didn't follow the wrong paths I did, and you've grown so much." By the time she was 30, the flamboyance of her youth had faded, and Carol's serene gaze was filled with deep emotion as she looked at me. "It's all because you were there, Carol. Without you, I don't know where I would be." The thought of what could have happened if Carol hadn't offered to become my family that day made me shiver. Carol caressed my head with the same affection as she had 8 years ago. A year after I started my hopeful student life, a spring day brought an unexpected confrontation at my apartment. It was my parents, their eyes red with anger. "Did you too deceive Doris?" they shouted. What I replied, caught off guard. "What happened to Doris? Which medical school is she going to?" I asked back, which only deepened the redness in their faces. "Don't joke. You must know about Doris. Doris has gone off to do her own thing." My father was too agitated to finish his sentence. I knew what had upset them, so I responded appropriately. It seems Doris has enrolled in culinary school. Did you put her up to this? You've given her these bad ideas." I hadn't done anything of the sort. In reality, while Doris let our parents believe she was preparing for medical school, she had secretly aspired to study nutrition and was accepted into that program. She will be starting her studies in nutrition, not medicine, this April. You think you're in a low place, so you're jealous of your sister becoming a doctor. How wicked, my mother accused me angrily. That's not true. Doris chose her path on her own. Don't lie. There's no way that an excellent child would choose to be a nutritionist. In fact, Doris is not ultimately aiming to be a nutritionist, but I kept that fact to myself. Mom and Dad have never really understood Doris. Mom stomps her feet in anger. That's your fault. It has nothing to do with Anna. What? From behind me, Doris and Carol appear. Surprised to see Doris here, my parents' anger intensifies. Then, they turn their criticism towards Carol. "Carol, is this your doing? Did you lead not only Anna but also Doris down the wrong path? I think that's none of your business." As if to protect Carol from my father's attempt to attack her, Doris steps forward. "Don't blame Carol. It was because I showed an interest in cooking that she offered her kitchen to me." Indeed, as Doris visited Carol's house to see her, she developed an interest in cooking and gradually became passionate while helping out in the kitchen. Focused solely on her academic performance, my parents seemed not to notice even when she came home smelling of sesame oil. Though culinary school was considered, she could not leave home without a scholarship, so she chose nutrition instead. Like me, Doris received a grant-based scholarship, which enabled her to stand up to her parents. She aims to be a chef in the future. My father's lips tremble with anger. "Doris, I'll accept you taking a gap year, so withdraw from the university immediately and go to a preparatory school." I absolutely refuse. Doris firmly opposed my father's unilateral outburst. Seeing this, my mother tried to reason with Doris gently. "Doris, going into a profession like nutrition or cooking, which anyone can do, isn't worthy of your talents. Everyone is expecting you to become a doctor. In that case, Mom, can you cook?" "What? If anyone can do it, do you know how to perfectly fry popcorn, shrimp, or make bechamel sauce?" Well, It was clear that my mother was not skilled in the kitchen. She had always relied on deli foods and delivered meals to get by. As a result, Doris and I were completely enchanted by Carol's home cooking. While my mother was at a loss for words, Doris laughed coldly. "It's really ironic to live relying on the help of others to cook for you, and then look down on chefs. Well, instead of forcing me to become a doctor, it would be better to give my place to someone who truly desires to be one. It would contribute more to helping others. That's just an excuse. Mom, Dad, don't you know? Actually, my sister is far more talented than I am." "What?" My parents stood with their mouths agape. "There's no way that's true. Do you even know which university my sister is attending?" My parents looked at each other. "As I thought, you don't know. You also don't know how excellent the architecture department is at the university she attends. She was accepted into a national university's architecture program because she is academically excellent." While it might be an exaggeration to say Doris is more talented than I am, it's a fact that I became a top student thanks to Carol's support. It's true, Mom and Dad. You wouldn't know how well I did in school because you never attended any of my parent-teacher conferences. With that, my parents lost their momentum and fell silent. I looked at them with a cold gaze. "The success in raising Anna wasn't due to you, but thanks to Carol." Doris laughed as if she had given up. "That can't be true. It's impossible. Don't worry. I've arranged for my tuition myself, and I'm prepared to live on my own. I've already moved my things. You didn't notice, did you?" What? The color drained from my parents' faces as they had been furious just moments ago. Carol watched this unfold, looking completely fed up. "You both were only ever interested in grades. It's a shame that your wonderful children weren't understood for who they are." Feeling humiliated, my parents groaned in discomfort. Being pitied by Carol, whom they had once looked down upon, must have been the ultimate humiliation. But that was the reality. My parents found no words to retort. Eventually, Doris left home that day with the help of a friend, relocating to another state, over 5 hours away by car. I didn't expect this incident to prompt any improvement in my parents' behavior or make them back off from Doris and me. When I advanced to my second year of university, my parents suddenly called me. I couldn't shake off an ominous feeling. No matter what they say, I would firmly refuse to return home. We met at a restaurant they frequented, but when Carol accompanied me, my parents clearly showed their displeasure. As soon as we sat down, they spread out numerous pamphlets on the table, all from universities with medical schools. What's this? We're giving you a chance to retrieve for medical school. Isn't that a good deal? We're offering you a chance to redeem yourself. Show that you can surpass your sister because of whom you've been looked down upon. Such an unexpected turn of events. How foolish. They really don't understand. But I decided to play along, just for amusement. Really? I'm so happy. Maybe I can actually get in here. To think that you both care so much about me. I really should be thankful. My father nodded, looking pleased with himself. My mother's face also brightened. As if that could ever be true. I couldn't hold back my laughter and burst out laughing. Ha, 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 ha. What's wrong? I just laughed seeing Dad so happy. To take such a proposal seriously? Impossible? After all, I have my own life. What? The moment my parents realized I was joking, their faces rapidly turned red. They are as quick to anger as they are far from the intellectual caliber of a doctor. Doris has never looked down on me. It's you who have always looked down on us. That's, well. Anyway, I have no intention of trying for medical school again. I responded with firm resolve, and a vein throbbed on my father's forehead. Why can't you and Doris understand the nobility of being a doctor? Is this also Carol's fault? Once again, my father directed his blame at Carol, completely missing the point. Carol simply gave a wry smile. Brother, you're so stubborn. What did you say? Anna and Doris aren't denying the work of doctors, they just have passions elsewhere. And those are in professions like architecture, nutrition, and cooking, which anyone can supposedly do. Even if they are jobs anyone can do, that's fine. What? Startled by the sudden voice, my father turned around to see two muscular, healthy-looking men standing there. Who are you? Perfect timing, you just insulted an architect and his son. What? They looked surprised. At that moment, Carol stood up and gently pulled the young man next to her closer with her arm. This is my husband. It's an honor to meet you, brother-in-law. I am Alexander Davis. Carol has told me a lot about you. Yes. Carol's husband smiled, showing his white teeth. Actually, Carol had started dating Mr. Davis 5 years ago, and they officially got married when I turned 20. Despite my reassurances, they were stubborn and affectionate enough to wait to marry until I was an adult. As a result, I became close to Carol's in-laws and developed an interest in architecture. When Carol suddenly announced her marriage and her husband spoke meaningfully, my parents were taken aback and lost for words. Next, Carol's father-in-law stepped forward with a smile and began to speak. Nice to meet you, Dr. Barnes. I am Davis, and I run an architectural business in this area. I understand Anna has heard about my work from Carol and has taken an interest. You are truly an insightful, wonderful person. Yes. I am planning to retire from the field soon, and I would like Anna to join our company as an architect and learn the ropes to carry on in the future. How dare you decide such a thing on your own? As they raised their voices, Davis opened his eyes wide and stared at them. Even if you call it presumptuous, the fact that you have shown no interest in Anna so far is undeniable. Trying to manipulate Anna after her sister has left the house is quite reprehensible, don't you think? How rude. How much do you think outsiders understand about us? Indeed, that's true. But then again, human relationships are mostly about interactions with others. What? Davis looked around. My parents also looked around and could see their faces losing color. Other customers at the restaurant were looking at them with cold eyes. Raising one's voice inevitably attracts attention. Everyone is disappointed. We never thought Dr. Barnes, whom we've respected for so long, could look down on others like this. That's not true. As my father trembled, his favorite dish was served. the chef of the restaurant brought it over. "Dr. Barnes, I'm sorry. It must be difficult for you to eat food prepared by us ordinary workers. You no longer need to endure it. Unfortunately, this marks the end of our relationship with you. I will communicate the same to other restaurants." Wait, that's not what I meant. "We feel it is not appropriate for people who can be replaced to use your clinic, so we will no longer visit. I will inform my acquaintances of this as well." What? All eyes in the restaurant were on my parents. Unable to withstand the pressure, they left the restaurant in a hurry, leaving their food and pamphlets behind. Since that incident, my parents no longer pressured me to pursue a medical degree. After some time, they approached me pleading, "We want to clear up everyone's misunderstandings." It seems the incident at the restaurant led to a significant decrease in their patients. The hospital was originally established a long time ago and had many regular elderly patients who overlapped with the clientele of a similarly long-standing restaurant. Due to word of mouth among the local elderly, a reputation spread that the hospital has the worst doctors who disregard their patients, and patients began moving to a newly opened hospital near the station. The doctors at the new hospital were not only skilled but also personable, and not a single patient returned to the hospital my father runs. In a short period, the management deteriorated, stress built up, and my father lashed out at the staff, resulting in nurses and administrative workers resigning one after another. This further fueled rumors that the hospital has an ethical problem with its doctors, leading to a continuous decrease in both staff and patients. Operating the hospital had become a financial burden. My parents believed that if I could clear up the misunderstandings, everyone would return, but once a bad reputation is spread, it is not easily erased. In fact, most of the reputation was based on truth, so there was no need for correction. However, some exaggerated stories also existed. For example, there's a story about my father standing up in a restaurant and yelling, "This incompetent chef," and demanding an apology from the chef. Though this isn't true, I strangely have a memory as if I had witnessed such a scene. Eventually, the family-run hospital had to close, and there were voices of blame from relatives. Unable to bear the humiliation, my parents sold our proud family home and started a reclusive life in the countryside. 5 years have passed, and I have successfully built my career as an architect, working for the architectural firm run by Carol's in-laws. While I still have a way to go compared to the top designers, I am diligently working every day to achieve my dream. That dream is to design the diner operated by Doris and Carol. Additionally, Doris and I hope to open this place once a week to the local children. Just as Carol saved us, we want to give back to the children. This is a deep wish and lifelong vow for us sisters. Supported by Carol and colleagues who share this dream, I am living a fulfilling life every day. Here, the divorce papers. I'm taking all the inheritance for myself. Dean said with a big yawn as I was greeting our relatives, and chuckled lightly. "What are you joking about? In such a situation, how could you?" "It's no joke. You were Dad's favorite, so I married you reluctantly. There's no other choice but for me to take over Dad's company. Meaning, all the inheritance is mine. With Dad gone, you're no longer needed." Despite his father just having passed away, Dean was only thinking about the inheritance. Hearing Dean's words, I felt something I had been holding back suddenly snap. My father-in-law had once been a great help to me, and I had endured for his sake, but I can't take it anymore. "Fine, I'll grant you the divorce." I decided on revenge to protect the company left by my deceased father-in-law and regain the self-respect I lost through my marriage to Dean. This isn't over yet. My name is Brenda Lewis. I will turn 33 this year. I had to take over Cooper Manufacturing immediately after my father died in an accident at the age of 25, without time to grieve. Back then, the role of president felt overwhelming to me, who was just an ordinary employee, and my spirit nearly broke many times. During those times, my father-in-law, Dalton, supported me. Dalton was an old friend of my father's and rushed over as soon as he heard the news. Being a business owner himself, Dalton taught me the basics of management from scratch. He is a great benefactor to both me and my company. 3 years after becoming president, Dalton invited me to dinner and introduced me to his son, Dean. "Brenda, this is my son, Dean. I've put him in charge of managing one of our branches. We hope to increase cooperation with your company. Please look forward to working together." "Nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you from my father. I've been entrusted with the branch office, but I'm still inexperienced, so please guide me kindly." Dean, who spoke with a bright smile, seemed at first glance to be a very sincere young man. Knowing he was Dalton's son, I was convinced of his competence and was able to build a friendly relationship quickly. Dean, always with a smile, asked, "I heard from my father that you're managing a company at such a young age after your late father's passing. Your abilities are impressive given your youth. What industry does your business operate in?" To this, I revealed the name of our company. Our company is called Cooper Manufacturing, and we primarily handle automobile parts. I'm still an inexperienced president, but I'm striving every day to protect this company left by my father. Without the support of many, including Miss Lewis, I wouldn't have had the confidence to run this company on my own. Cooper Manufacturing, you say? That's a new name to me. I understand small factories are having a tough time in the current economic climate, but I support you. Dean then looked at me with what seemed like disdain, but quickly returned to his previous gentle smile. Although I felt a slight discomfort at that change, I quickly convinced myself I was overthinking it and continued the conversation while enjoying some drinks. Gradually, Dean began to ask me out for meals and dates more frequently, and half a year after we met, he proposed to me. "Brenda, let's start a relationship. I've always sought someone as strong and warm-hearted as you." Initially hesitant, I decided to date him due to his sincere attitude and my gratitude towards Dalton. After a year of dating, the two of us got married. During our engagement, Dean was continuously kind and treated me with great care. "So when do you plan to quit your job?" One morning, a month after our wedding, Dean casually threw that question at me while I was preparing breakfast. I stopped the knife I was holding. I haven't thought about quitting." Dean frowned in displeasure at my response and looked unhappy. "Hey, we're married, right? Sure, it's just a branch, but I am the president. You working despite being married makes it seem like my income is insufficient, which isn't a good impression for other employees. But this company is what my father left behind. I won't leave it no matter what." Dean snorted disdainfully and continued with a condescending attitude. "It's just a small-town factory. When compared to big corporations like ours, it's clear which is more important." I realized then that the discomfort I felt when we first met was because Dean looked down on the company my father had left as merely a small-town factory. "Dean, That's not the right way to speak. My company has important business partners and staff. I can't just quit. Business partners and staff? That's nothing significant. Isn't it obvious that your company doesn't even compare to one of our branches? I was at a loss for words at his remark. Dean clearly didn't understand the responsibility of running a company, regardless of its size. I took a deep breath and tried to address the situation calmly. Dean, the value of a company isn't just in its size. Even if it's small, it has its significance. My company, too. I get it. It's important to you. But face reality. It's unimaginable that a company run by someone as inexperienced as you could survive. After throwing those words at me, Dean glanced at me with contempt. His attitude was so shocking that it went beyond anger. My father was a warm-hearted president who cherished his employees. I always admired my father for that. But Dean insulted my father. Struggling to contain my trembling anger, I barely managed to respond. Dean, our companies may differ in size, but our employees and partners are important too. It's wrong to belittle them like that, and please stop looking down on my company as just a small-town factory. So what? It's just a local business, right? Our company handles various products, including automobiles and appliances. The difference in scale is clear. This is why it's troublesome with beginners. Really, it's disheartening. I'll have breakfast outside. Sighing, Dean left for work without waiting for a reply. Left alone. I could only stand there. And then, the tears I had been holding back began to overflow. Wiping my tears, I cleaned up the breakfast dishes with a feeling of frustration. Frustration, sadness, and my disappointment and revulsion towards Dean muddled my emotions. That evening, when I returned home exhausted, unexpectedly, Dean was already back. As I opened the front door, the aroma of delicious cooking filled the house. "I'm home," I said quietly. In response to my words, Dean peeked out from the kitchen. "Welcome back, Brenda." His voice was warmer than it had been in the morning. As I stood there puzzled, Dean began to speak. "I'm sorry about this morning. I was stressed from work and took it out on you. I shouldn't have directed it at you," he apologized to me. The sight of him apologizing gradually dissolved the anger in my heart. As a gesture of reconciliation, I tried to prepare dinner. "I'm not confident about the taste, though," Dean said with a bashful smile. His words made me smile involuntarily. "Thank you, I really appreciate it," I expressed my gratitude. We sat down at the table together and began eating the meal Dean had prepared. While the food wasn't gourmet, his effort made it strangely delicious. "It's good. Thank you, Dean," I murmured softly. Dean smiled satisfactorily at that. With this, our argument seemed to have ended, but afterwards, there was a noticeable change in Dean's behavior. For a time, he regained his former kindness, but gradually he became colder towards me and his disparaging remarks about my company increased. A year into our marriage, his behavior resembled that of a tyrannical ruler. When I came home late from work, he greeted me sarcastically while lying on the sofa. "Finally home, huh, Madam President?" What time do you think it is? I'm sorry. I was held up by an unexpected meeting. I'll prepare dinner right away. I said this almost apologetically and hurried to the kitchen. Watching me, Dean scoffed derisively. A meeting? Huh? Were you really working overtime? Is the president of a small-town factory that busy? I didn't respond to his words and silently started cooking. The relationship between us continued to deteriorate. Dean, disliking mere formal apologies, appeared before me without hiding his anger, saying coldly, "Brenda, do you understand how you're managing to live like this? You're acting like you're just the president of some small-town factory." I internally resisted, but dealing with his company was crucial for mine. I gave up on arguing, but it wasn't that I felt nothing. Struggling to contain my anger, I responded with a trembling voice. "I live thanks to your support. I appreciate it." This response irritated Dean, and he became even more aggressive. "If you're thankful, show it. Or apologize from the bottom of your heart, and I'll forgive you." I bit my lip hard to suppress my anger. "What's the matter? Can't you do it? If you can't, I don't mind terminating our contract with your company. I can crush your company any time. If there's no apology, I'll suspend our transactions." As he said this with a sneer, I felt disgusted but decided to protect my company. Though I tried to apologize, my pride wouldn't allow it, and I hesitated. "What are you doing? Hurry up." Pushed by his urging, I finally pleaded. "Please continue doing business with us. I beg you." Seeing me beg so desperately, Dean laughed smugly. "Hack, pathetic. To think such a person is a president." His attitude and his contemptuous words made me feel frustrated, but I had no choice but to yield to his threat to stop the transactions. I quietly endured the situation. 3 years into our marriage, Dean's arrogant behavior intensified, and his criticism towards me and my company worsened. Every time I came home, I was almost certainly met with his harsh words. Initially, I protested, but once I realized arguing was pointless, I just let it slide. "Really, how late can you be? How long do you plan to keep me waiting?" He would greet me angrily and then continue to complain at length about me and my company. "You say you've been working late recently, but is your company about to go under? Don't worry, if it fails, I'll hire you after it's ruined. I'll spread the rumor that an incompetent woman destroyed her company." Sneering as he said this, I felt resentment towards him but knew arguing was futile, so I remained silent. Perhaps dissatisfied with my attitude, Dean's anger only grew, and he kept complaining to me. "You really lack the awareness of being a president. A president is supposed to be the leader of the company, yet you can't do anything beyond your job and taking care of me. If it weren't for me, you couldn't do anything at all, so try harder to please me." With that final accusation, he cheerfully headed to the bedroom. Feeling both anger and emptiness from Dean's attitude, I quietly cleaned up. I was utterly exhausted by such daily routines, and living with Dean had become a torment. Still, I dreamed of the day I could turn the tables on him, and for now I could only endure. That day became unforgettable. I received a call that Dalton, my father-in-law, had fallen ill. When I rushed to the hospital, I found out he was unconscious and in critical condition. As I stepped into the hospital room, Dean stood there looking lost. I approached slowly and gently took Dalton's hand. "Father-in-law," I called out quietly. It seemed like his hand moved slightly, but it might have been my imagination. The next morning, Dalton quietly passed away. On the day of the funeral, I wore black mourning clothes and quietly entered the venue where people were gathering. The number of attendees conveyed how much Dalton was loved. In the solemn atmosphere, I politely greeted each mourner and looked for Dean. The moment I spotted him, an unbelievable scene unfolded before me. Dean, as the chief mourner, wore an inappropriate, bored expression and occasionally yawned largely, seemingly unaware of the cold stares from the visitors. "Dean," I called out to him quietly. He turned towards me and his expression changed momentarily, but soon he seemed to lose interest and return to his previous demeanor. I took a deep breath and vowed to remain calm. "Are you properly greeting the people who've come for the funeral?" Dean scoffed disdainfully, pulled out his smartphone, and said coldly, "It's too much hassle, handle it yourself." I watched in astonishment as he opened a game app. "Dean, your father's funeral is happening right now," I said with a trembling voice, trying to draw his attention, but he continued to ignore me, absorbed in his smartphone. Occasionally, the sound of his game cut through the surrounding silence, and I could feel the icy stares from the attendees. Feeling apologetic to those around us, I tried to gently stop him from using his smartphone. "Please, just for today, refrain from it," I pleaded, but Dean shook off my hand without hiding his irritation. "Stop bothering me. Let me do what I want at the funeral. It would be better if this ended sooner." He continued with his insensitive remarks. His words weighed heavily on my heart, and I questioned if this was the man I once loved. There was no trace of respect for Dalton. Eventually, the funeral ended somehow, and as the family gathering for the meal began, Dean blurted out boredly, "Finally, it's over. Here are the divorce papers. I'm taking all the inheritance for myself," he said half-jokingly as he laughed smugly. In his hand, he already held a divorce paper he had filled out. I stared at Dean, dumbfounded. "What are you joking about? In such a situation, how could you?" "It's no joke. You were Dad's favorite, so I married you reluctantly. There's no choice but for me to take over Dad's company, meaning all the inheritance is mine. With Dad gone, you're no longer needed." Dean seemed only interested in the inheritance, even just after his father had passed away. "Dean, let's put off this talk. There's no need to discuss this right now." "No, we settle this here. If you don't agree to the divorce, I'll terminate all contracts with your company." His statement caused an uproar among the relatives. "Are you really going to do that?" "Yes, I'm serious. Ending the contracts with your small factory won't affect my company." Dean's words pushed me to my limit. I had been grateful to and loved my father-in-law, and so I endured everything because of him, but I could no longer bear it. Fine, I'll grant you the divorce. As I made the offer, Dean smiled broadly, handed me the divorce papers, and said, "Make sure to submit these soon. By the way, you can stay in the house until next week." And then he left the scene. Trembling with anger, I took only the essentials and immediately checked into a nearby hotel. Since I don't have children, I can be flexible. This helps me respond quickly to situations. The next morning, I went to the courthouse at its opening time to submit the divorce papers, and then immediately contacted my secretary to arrange an emergency board meeting in 1 hour. Upon arriving at the company, the board members were already waiting in the conference room. As I entered, they all stood up in respect. Once I took my seat, they sat down as well. I apologize for the urgency, but there is an important decision that needs to be shared. I began, and someone audibly swallowed in nervousness. Some may already be aware of yesterday's events. I continued calmly. Effective today, we will cease all dealings with Lewis Precision Engineering. Please review the contracts to ensure there are no penalties for breach. Voices of surprise filled the meeting room. Lewis Precision Engineering had been a valuable partner to our enterprise, but it was also led by Dean. After all discussions were concluded and the board members had left the room, I walked over to the window and took a deep breath. Looking out, I firmed up my new decision. Let's take action. I called my secretary and issued the necessary instructions. Prepare a notice ending our dealings with Lewis Precision Engineering and inform my ex-husband as well. Set up a meeting at 3 p.m. After my secretary nodded and left, I looked out the window again and murmured, "Are you ready? This is just the beginning." Smiling, I stood in front of the building of Lewis Precision Engineering at 2:45 p.m., adjusting my suit and taking a deep breath. Upon giving my name at reception, I received a polite response. "Miss Cooper, you have a 3 p.m. appointment. Please wait a moment." After a call through the internal line, a young woman quickly came to greet me. Her demeanor made it clear that she was my husband's secretary. We followed her and took the elevator to the top floor of the building. My heart rate increased slightly, but I made an effort to maintain a calm expression. After arriving, the secretary led the way and stopped in front of a large door, giving a light knock. When the door opened, there was Dean, seated in a large chair within the spacious office. "What do you want? Is the divorce finalized? Or did you come to ask for money? A woman running a small-town factory must have too much free time on her hands." His voice was dripping with his usual arrogance. Since we had no financial arrangements when we parted, he seemed to misunderstand that I had come to demand something. I quietly took a seat and, after calming myself, continued speaking. "It's been a while, President Lewis. I am here to discuss business matters." What's with the cold attitude? He could hardly hide his irritation. Smiling slightly, I slowly took a document out of my bag and said, "I have come to deliver this. As of today, we will be terminating our business dealings with your company." As I spoke calmly, Dean's face changed color, and he froze momentarily. However, his laughter soon filled the room. "You're joking, right? Your company is cutting off business with us? It's just a small-town factory, isn't it?" Dean still seemed unable to grasp the reality. In fact, Lewis Precision Engineering's business with Cooper Manufacturing accounts for 40% of your revenue. This will significantly impact your company. He looked back at me in astonishment. "You're lying. I thought Cooper Manufacturing was just a small-town factory." "You didn't know at all, did you? Cooper Manufacturing actually employs 9,000 people and has an annual revenue of $1 billion. That's absurd." Just as he was about to say something, his secretary discreetly conveyed something to him. At that moment, Dean's complexion changed drastically and turned pale. As I thought about the significant impact our business termination would have on his company, a smile couldn't help but spill across my face. But I never heard such a thing from you. You just assumed when you heard the company name. I simply followed through on what you said. Ending business with Cooper Manufacturing won't affect my company was what you said, right? I repeated his words calmly, highlighting how crucial they had been for the survival of his company. This break could mean the end of his company. He seemed to realize this as his face grew even paler. "Wait a minute. I just misunderstood Cooper Manufacturing as a mere small-town factory. Besides, if you're making so much, why do you always wear such simple clothes? You're joking, right, Brenda?" Dean, previously full of confidence, now pleaded weakly. "You really don't understand anything. I'm just following my father's teachings." I sighed deeply and looked at him intently. My father despised flaunting wealth and understood its risks well. That's why I live modestly, quite the opposite of you, who squanders money. As I smiled gently, Dean's face turned red with anger and embarrassment, and he fell silent. "Just because we're divorced doesn't mean I want to end the dealings. Doing business with Lewis Precision Engineering has indeed been profitable for us. However, recent issues with quality and delays in delivery." I paused mid-sentence and looked directly at Dean. "And the main reason is your moral failings. You shirked your responsibilities as the chief mourner at your father's funeral and pushed a divorce paper at me while many relatives watched. You declared, 'All the inheritance is mine.' I was drunk. I was sad about my father's death and had some drinks before the funeral. It wasn't intentional. For 3 years since our marriage, you have looked down on me. You never understood my profession, only criticized and insulted me. And yesterday you showed your true colors. If that wasn't your true self, then what is?" Dean remained silent, at a loss for words. Dealing with someone who lacks such ethical standards poses a risk to Cooper Manufacturing. That's why we are terminating our dealings. Brenda, please reconsider. Our company will go under. As Dean pleaded in a feeble voice, I responded with a cold smile. Your company will be fine, right? I remember you often said, I can buy it out anytime if I really wanted to. Dean's complexion turned ghostly pale. Dean likely never imagined his own words would come back to haunt him like this. You bastard. As he said this, Dean stood up and swung his arm towards me in anger. At that moment, his movement froze mid-air. "Do you really intend to overpower me? Go ahead, try it. If you commit violence here, the reputation of Lewis Precision Engineering will only worsen. Moreover, attacking the female president of Cooper Manufacturing would be even more disgraceful." My calm response caused Dean's hand to tremble. "Damn it!" While filled with rage, he slowly lowered his hand. "This is goodbye. Farewell." With that, I left the room. I could hear Dean's shouts behind me, but they seemed distant now. Half a year had passed since my company ended our business dealings with Lewis Precision Engineering. During that time, the decline of Lewis Precision Engineering was significant. Initially, Dean tried to revive the business. He looked for new business partners and tried to motivate his employees, but once the termination of our dealings became public, his company's credibility rapidly declined. 2 months later, major clients began to cancel their contracts one after another, and Dean started offering excessive trading conditions, which further damaged his company's reputation. 4 months in, Lewis Precision Engineering faced financial difficulties, payments to employees were delayed, and staff began resigning or moving to other companies. The bankruptcy of Lewis Precision Engineering seemed inevitable. That day, I received a phone call. "Hello, Brenda." The voice was hoarse and difficult to hear, but I immediately recognized it as Dean. "What is it?" I asked coolly. "Please, I need to talk to you in person." Gone was his previous arrogance, replaced only by a tone of desperation. "All right, let's meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. at Cooper Manufacturing." After hanging up, I sighed heavily. I had decided to end it all. The next day, Dean arrived 10 minutes early for our appointment. He was a shadow of his former self, wearing a worn-out suit, unshaven, with clearly bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep. "Thank you for waiting," I said as I entered the reception room, and Dean quickly stood up. "Brenda, thank you. I'm really glad to see you." His voice was trembling. "Please, I'm begging you to resume business with Lewis Precision Engineering." "Why?" I asked in a cold voice. Dean seemed taken aback for a moment, but then responded with a look of desperation. "My company is on the brink of collapse. I can't even pay my employees, and the pressure from creditors is increasing day by day. That is the result of your management decisions." My merciless reply changed his complexion. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees and bowed deeply. "Please, just give me one more chance." His figure was pitiful and tragic. The once arrogant man was now prostrating himself on the ground, begging for forgiveness. "Dean," I called, and he briefly lifted his face, showing a glimpse of hope. But I continued, "I'm sorry, but there is no second chance." My cold words froze him. I could see his eyes shift from hope to despair. But Brenda Dean tried to continue with a trembling voice, but I cut him off. "Enough. You belittled me for 3 years. Even on the day of your father's funeral, you trampled on my feelings. There is no room for sympathy for someone like you." Dean once again lowered his forehead to the floor. pleading as if seeking pity. "I have already apologized for that. Please. This isn't for the sake of the company, not for me, but genuinely for the employees." My resolve was firm, knowing that such apologies, while necessary, did not erase the consequences of his actions or the underlying attitudes that led to them. This was about more than just business, it was about respect and consequences. For the employees, if you had truly put them first, it wouldn't have come to this. This is the result of prioritizing your own protection. Dean's shoulders trembled, and he continued in a tearful voice, "Please, don't abandon me." In response to Dean's plea, I calmly noted the time. "It's time now. President Lewis, please leave for today." At that, the secretary entered the room. She took Dean by the hand and gently wiped his tear-streaked face as she led him out. Around noon, I went down to the lobby, where Dean was still standing. He looked at me, seemingly about to say something, but his opportunity was interrupted by the sudden appearance of a third party. "President, may I have a moment of your time?" the person asked quietly. Hearing that voice, Dean dropped to his knees in shock. "What's happening? Morgan, why are you here?" The employee called Morgan glanced at Dean briefly, but then returned his focus to me. "President, may I have a little of your time?" "No problem. Let's discuss this in the conference room," I answered, moving forward before Dean could say anything. In that instant, Dean tried to grab my arm in a panic. "Wait a minute. Brenda. What is this about? Why is my subordinate here?" However, before he could touch me, security swiftly intervened. "Unbelievable. Morgan, you are a traitor," Dean exclaimed. "You are the one who betrayed me, Lewis. It's clear you pursued only your own interests, without any regard for your employees," Morgan replied calmly. At this, Dean's face went completely pale, losing all color. "Morgan, this way," I urged him, and we left the area. As we departed, Dean's screams echoed behind us, but I did not look back. Despite the cessation of dealings with Lewis Precision Engineering, Cooper Manufacturing continued to grow, absorbing new talent and achieving success in new ventures. The workforce exceeded 12,000 employees, significantly expanding its market share and raising expectations as a pillar of the U.S. economy. Cooper Manufacturing's growth was recognized, and I received the CEO of the Year award. As a female leader, my status solidified, and I was widely covered in the media. 5 years later, in the fall, I attended the opening ceremony of Cooper Manufacturing's new headquarters. From the top floor of this building, I looked out over the expansive view of New York, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. In my speech at the ceremony, I concluded, "Adversity is the nourishment that strengthens us. We have the strength to overcome any difficulty. Cooper Manufacturing will continue to move forward." Thunderous applause filled the venue, resonating deeply within me. Dean's life had changed dramatically, to the astonishment of those around him. Driven by financial greed, he personally guaranteed corporate bonds and misappropriated funds. Subsequently, his amateur investment strategies failed, and through fraud, he incurred even more substantial debts, ultimately leading to his company's collapse. It's said that his total debt exceeded $50 million. Even after stepping down as president, he was constantly pursued by creditors, living a life overshadowed by daily repayments. He filed for bankruptcy, hoping for debt forgiveness, but his extravagance backfired, and he was forced to continue repayments. His payments were often delayed, and the debt grew even larger due to interest. Whether he can repay all his debts during his lifetime is unpredictable. One day, I accidentally saw him working as a part-time employee at a local supermarket. He looked much older than when I last saw him, with thinning hair and a vacant stare, a stark contrast to the man he once was. Next to a magazine headline reading Cooper Manufacturing President, among the top 10 in annual income, he silently stocked shelves. Seeing him, I felt a mix of emotions. The man who once looked down on me was now in such a predicament. I looked away and quietly left the scene. My private life began with meeting a very attractive man 3 years ago. This meeting culminated in our marriage at the end of last year. He is supportive of my career path, strongly backing my professional choices. We have built a beautiful relationship where we support each other and grow together. Currently, we are enjoying the joy of expecting a new life. Next spring, I am due to embrace a new role as a mother, which will be a significant turning point for me. Although my concerns about maintaining a balance between work and home life are not entirely resolved, I am confident that with the support of family, friends, and colleagues, I will be able to overcome these challenges. I am very much looking forward to seeing how much I have grown by this time next year. I am committed to working hard towards the ideals I aspire to and forging a fulfilling future for myself. Against the grand backdrop of New York, I quietly smile. My expression is brimming with a sense of accomplishment and hope. I close my eyes gently and speak to my late father in my heart. Dad, the vision you once had for the company, I have made it a reality.